Morning, my name is Leonardo Vilchis, and I'm come here for Unión de Vecinos. Over the last year, we've been visiting about 3,000 people in our community. That is 75% renters. Most of them live in 2, 3, and 4 unit complexes, and we're very concerned about this. We don't want any amendments to this proposal, and we're here to support it. But any amendment would be for us aiding and abetting a crime. These people are using the law to turn housing into rental and make a profit out of it, and pushing people out of our community. People who are barely making $25,000 to $30,000 a year. So we're in support of this proposal, and we don't want any amendments.
Hello, my name is Kenia, and I also work with Unión de Vecinos. And one of the things that we're noticing, Boyle Heights alone has lost about 1,500 units of affordable housing. I wonder how much more we're losing in LA. And one of the things we want is we don't want to lose any more affordable housing. We already are losing, landlords are already illegally evicting tenants. And by allowing them to now legally evict them and bring housing that it's more expensive for them, it's just a crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three speakers, Tara Bannister, followed by Vic Viorek, followed by George Milston.
Good morning, council members. My name is Tara Bannister. I'm the executive director of the California Apartment Association, and these people on the left are mainly my members of my association. Most of them have never been in this room before and have enjoyed sitting here and watching and being part of the democratic process for the first time. I sent out a notice that this was coming up today, yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and this is the response we had. I've had calls from all across the nation that want to absolutely stop rent control. 35 states have outlawed rent control as a bad economic policy, and there are only 17 jurisdictions in the entire United States that have any form of price controls, which is what rent control is. We do believe that what you would do with this is a violation of state law, and we have every intention to sue if you do pass this. We stand very firmly against rent control. Rent control is not necessarily affordable housing. It doesn't necessarily help the low income the same way that Section 8 does, or low income tax credit properties. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. For the tenants who are complaining and have the affordable housing problems, this fits very well, or the problems fit very well under the phrase of be careful what you ask for, you may get it. Well, they've asked for it and they've gotten it, the problems. The City of Los Angeles is having budget problems, a shortage of affordable housing, and proliferation of gangs. Considering how the City Council has been voting on rental problems, housing policies, it's no surprise. When owners try to fix up their property and rehab it, they're penalized at least 50% of the amount of money they put into it. No wonder that property is deteriorating. If you want to have more affordable housing, preserving it, and not undermine the city's budget, and you want to grow jobs, thousands of jobs could be created by changing your whole strategy.
District A Council member Bernard Parks asked the general manager of the housing department, Mercedes Marquez, for statistics on affordable housing.
But let me just ask, in the sense of your opposition for the exemptions, is that you think it covers too large of a number of the properties, not necessarily, or both units and properties?
No. My concern is that, as I understand it, sir, I was asked to think about how would we protect the small mom and pop owner. This fix goes way beyond that mom and pop owner and actually would permit anybody to start buying duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes and get an exemption.
Okay. So
that's my concern. If we want to protect mom and pop, we can find a way to do that. This is actually, the fix that's on the table now is way beyond protecting those people.
Okay. Your view is that it's preventive as opposed to an actual circumstance?
Yes.
Okay, you're looking at a preventive measure that you want to prevent that from happening, not that we have information that it's happening now.
Well, this
law
law
in the sense of people buying that kind of property at that level.
Oh, we know. I know of No, actually, there are actually quite a number of owners in the city of Los Angeles who are very large rental owners who their whole business is holding duplexes, triplexes, and apartments.
Thank
Yeah.
Explaining what the council is looking at, District 13 Council Member Eric Garcetti says we are not debating the expansion or abolishment of rent control.
But what this is about, pretty straightforwardly, is as we've had before, somebody who signs an affidavit saying that they're going to exit the rental market, and then within 5 years decide, they're going to build for sale, which allows them to, under law, to exit that, change their mind. If we took away for a second that this was about anything to do with rent control, it would be the equivalent of if we made people who are building in a place that's zoned for 4 stories, that they sign an affidavit that according to the zoning they're going to build 4 stories, and then later on said, actually I'd like to do that 8 stories. Now, of course the market would give more profit to that. I hear the argument that of course you get more and that would incentivize people to build, but we zone the city in some places 4 stories because that's what the law is and that's what we agree upon as a value. We are not, as was mentioned by somebody, debating today whether we expand rent control, whether we abolish it. I want to say that very clearly. There is no net gain of new rent-controlled units that would come out of this under any scenario, nor should there be, if we do this right, much of a loss unless they become for-sale units. In committee yesterday, somebody brought up the example, how does this play out, you might be asking, of an 8-unit building right now that was under rent stabilization. The rents might have been, let's say, $750. And one of the things we are working on, which is why Mr. Parks and I are moving forward along with this council on the fee study, is right now we have a system that disincentivizes good landlords because you keep your tenants longer and those rents stay lower. Bad landlords who are good at turning people over get to kick their rents up, and that seems to be a little perverse reward or punishment of good landlords. That said, let's say it was $750 for each of these 8 units. If they, and what the examples brought up, in a place that's zoned now to be able to build 20 units, it was asked what would happen to us. Well, under what we've put forward here, you could either replace those 8 units, but at market rent, even though they would then be stabilized, so they might go from $750 to $1,500 or $2,000. The other 12 units that would be built under that new zoning would be at market rate and would go up with the market. Or, if you wanted, you could actually reduce the number of units that were quote-unquote affordable, because you could make 20% of the new units affordable under our usual laws. So 4 units could be affordable in perpetuity at a lower level. So, to me, either way, there's a net gain and an incentive in the marketplace to do the investment. I know there's more profit if we don't have that rule, but it seems to be also the right thing to do to keep people in neighborhoods. When we ask ourselves why we have the worst traffic in the country, the worst pollution, it's because people are living further and further away from their jobs, and we aren't stabilizing and keeping people in communities.
Ms. Marquez answers questions about the Ellis Act, which is a state law that establishes the process for withdrawing residential rental property from the rental housing market.
Landlords who wish to remove their property, in other words, go out of business, come to the housing department and they fill out this form. It's called a landlord declaration, and it is called notice of intent to withdraw units from rental housing use.
So while some may not like that law and others may love it or want to expand it, it is the law today that if you want to take something out of rent control, you can do that by moving to a for-sale product?
Absolutely.
Okay. But this is a signature saying, I want to do that, that's my intent. And as the law is today, you can't convert that in, you can't go out of rent control to tomorrow create market rate rental units.
Correct.
Okay. Is this law meant to deal solely with individuals who either changed their minds or provided false information in the first place? When the housing, this wasn't, just to be clear, as much as we might all want to claim credit or oppose this was initiated from the housing department, from our own studies here. When this moved forward, was the law meant to deal solely with individuals who either changed their minds or who provide false information?
Yes.
Okay. Is it necessary to include an exemption for both number of units that are demolished as well as the number constructed? I think that might no longer be an issue, but I think we took the language out. So it's really for the demolished one. And one of the things that I've talked closely with Mr. Parks about, too, is he has said about the mom and pops that are out there that are 3 or 4 plex units, that it's not the only problem. I know that's what we heard about, but I want to be clear today, folks. We can maybe talk about that, which is a very small percentage of the overall units that are being converted, but it is lost units. But it is not just the mom and pop owner that has been holding on to something for a while and wants to make sure that investment yields something. Could you describe what is happening on like entire blocks where you might have a series of 5 or 10 fourplexes?
Well, I've been, in response to some questions I've received from around the Horseshoe, thinking about the idea of an exemption for whether it's a fourplex or a triplex or duplex, whatever it is. If I could for a moment just talk in context. Of the 620,000 units that are within the rent stabilization ordinance, 30% of them are made up of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So that is 180,000 units would fall into that category of what we're talking about. Right. Under the language that I have seen, the exemption is not focused on the owner in terms of being a mom and pop. Someone who, when I think of mom and pop, and certainly we have programs in the housing department directed at these very particular type of landlords. Folks who own one triplex, they're the owner-occupant, they live in one of the units, the rental income that they receive is part of their retirement income. Okay, so there's the idea of an exemption so that if they sell that building that they live in, they're exempted from any of this. But then, of course, there are many parts of the city, and this was discussed yesterday, that are made up of a neighborhood of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So if you go forward with an exemption that applies to the unit type as opposed to the person type, the landlord type that's a mom and pop, people could go in and buy fourplex after fourplex after fourplex after fourplex in order to assemble land to do a very large building and get the exemption. And so I guess what...
And to you, that goes against the spirit of what the housing department is trying to accomplish?
Well, certainly. It goes against the spirit of if there would be an exemption from a mom and pop, someone who really, this is their rental income. It goes against then having speculators and people who are not mom and pops at all, but are large developers, going in to buy one building after another that are made up of duplexes and triplexes, putting them together, and now building a very large building, having exempted themselves completely.
Referring to the homeless and middle class here in Los Angeles, District 1 Councilmember Ed Reyes wants to know what we need to do to protect mom and pop landlords that live in their units.
Our manager of our housing department, when we talk about a middle class issue, we talk about the working class issue, how many folks, and just start from the bottom in terms of socioeconomic strata, how many folks do we know are homeless today?
Oh, my God.
What's the number?
48,000 and counting.
And every night, how many families are sleeping out in the street? Do we know?
Thousands.
Give me a number, ballpark.
10,000.
10,000 people, families living in the street because they have no place to live.
Correct.
Middle class folks, our firefighters, our police department, how many of those folks cannot afford to pay rent today, or more than 30% of their income?
Actually, a very sizable number.
Ballpark figure?
Well, I mean, I can only tell you that Forbes says that only 2% of Angelinos can afford the median priced home. So we've dropped. Last year we were at 12% could afford. Now we're at 2% can afford.
2% can afford
a median priced home of about $540,000.
And these are
we're in trouble.
And these are people making around $50,000 a year.
And these are people making much more than that. These people at $100,000 a year can't afford that without help.
Council colleagues, I know I've been saying this up until I was blue in the face. I know I pushed hard 2-3 years ago for a zoning that I don't want to repeat because I know what's going to happen when people react to it. But the fact is, I want to protect the mom and pops who are in the business of living in their duplex and triplex and quadruplex. Does the current ordinance allow for that?
It does, and more.
It does protect the mom and pop.
It does.
Does it prevent the ability for speculators to come and buy these lots in a linear fashion or whatever fashion to bulldoze those, to tear down those units in order to build higher end, more expensive?
Not only does it not prevent that, it would incentivize it by saying you get an exemption if that's what you do.
And that is without requiring affordable units.
Correct.
So, in essence, the opportunities that will be created makes it harder for our middle class and our working class to even live in our own city.
Yes.
So 2/3 of the city is made up of renters.
Yes.
So we are directly penalizing the very same people that vote for us.
You could say that.
Okay. What do we need to do to alter the ordinance so that we can protect at least those who are mom and pop, who live in their unit, who can make a case for their hardship?
I think we would have to draw language, which I don't think would be all that difficult, actually, that would do something like this. If you own a triplex and you live in it, you would be permitted to be exempted from this. You would say, but only one, right? Only one triplex.
Only one.
Not if you have 5, you don't exempt them all. You can exempt the one you live in, and that's it. Right? Because if you're beyond that, now you're no longer a mom and pop. You're actually, an apartment owner. So we could do that fairly easily.
The item was continued and will be discussed further on Tuesday, May 22nd. Watch Council Week in Review next week to find out what action your Los Angeles City Council takes on regulation of newly constructed rental units that replace demolished rental units. LA City View is the government access cable channel for the city of Los Angeles, featuring live coverage of city council meetings and programming about city department services and events. If you have suggestions or comments about any of the programs you see on Channel 35 or would like to receive a free viewer guide, call our viewer hotline at 213-473-3978. Watch Council Week in Review for highlights of the week's council meetings and listen for the item numbers associated with those discussions you have an interest in. And then go to the World Wide Web and listen to them in their entirety using the new Video on Demand feature. Just go to the city's website at lacity.org and follow the instructions on the screen. Remember, you can watch all Los Angeles City Council meetings live in their entirety on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays beginning at 10 a.m. On Sundays, you can watch the replay of all the week's meetings beginning at 10 a.m. Now that concludes our program for the week ending May 18, 2007. On behalf of Jack Popejoy and everyone here at Channel 35, I'm Brad Pomerantz. Thank you for watching, and please join us for the next Council Week in Review.
morning and welcome to Tuesday, May 22nd, 2007 meeting of the Los Angeles City Council. We welcome our viewers on Channel 35 and the members of the public who have joined us here in John Ferraro Council Chambers in room 340 of City Hall, where we meet every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. The regular scheduled meetings of the Los Angeles City Council are here in City Hall, except for the first Friday of the month, in which we meet in Van Nuys City Hall in our efforts to bring City Council closer to all Angelinos. We are broadcast live on Channel 35 through the city's cable system and also rebroadcast in the evening. And you can always go and find our live streaming web video of our council meetings online at lacity.org. You also now can pull down archived meetings or of any of the items in our city council meetings or the entire meeting online as well at lacity.org, where there's a wealth of other information about your elected officials, city departments, and other important information for improving the quality of your life here in Los Angeles. Finally, you can always call on council phone, which is 213-621-CITY, a way of listening to audio proceedings of the City Council or any of our committees. Members of the public are invited to give public comment for items that are not on our agenda but are nevertheless under our jurisdiction, and we have cards in the back if you'd like to fill any of those out to be heard. Secondly, you can also give comments on items on our agenda that have been agendized for public comment. All items receive either a public hearing in committee or here in council. If it's already happened in committee, unless somebody reopens the public hearing, it will not be here in council. If it has not yet received a public hearing in council, again, if you'd like to fill out a speaker card in the back and hand it to one of the sergeant-at-arms on either side of the seating here, we will make sure we can hear you. And anybody who lives closer to Van Nuys, you can always show up there and testify remotely via our teleconferencing capability. So please feel free to be there and to testify for our regular meetings here. I want to thank the council members who are here pursuant to our council rules on time. We have 9 members just past the hour here. Richard Alarcon, Wendy Gruhl, Bernard Parks, Jan Perry, Bill Rosendahl, Greg Smith, Herb Wesson, Dennis Zine. We are awaiting one more member to begin the meeting. Councilmember Cardenas, Councilwoman Hahn, Councilmember Huizar, Councilmember Labange, Councilmember Reyes, Councilmember Weiss. We are awaiting your presence here in council chambers, so if you'll make your way down as soon as possible. Again, that's Councilmember Cardenas, Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Huizar, Councilmember Labange, Councilmember Reyes, and Councilmember Weiss. As soon as we have one of those members, we will have a quorum, which is 10 members or 2/3 of our 15-member body, and we will begin the meeting. Thank you to the members of the public for your patience while we await one more member. Again, Councilmember Cardenas, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Reyes, and Weiss. If you will join us, we will begin our meeting. Thank you. Councilmembers Cardenas, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Reyes, and Weiss. We are now awaiting your presence in council chambers to begin our meeting. Again, Councilmember Cardenas, Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Huizar, Councilmember Labange, Councilmember Reyes, and Councilmember Weiss. In compliance with our own council rules, we are now late, and we are awaiting your presence here in chambers to begin the meeting. So as soon as one of you can come down, we will begin the meeting. Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Gruel, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Westenstein, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
All right. Mr. Rosendahl moves and Mr. Zine seconds. Without objection, this will be approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Alarcon moves and Mr. Parks seconds. Without objection, they too will be approved. Next order of business.
Mr. President, this is Tuesday and there is a flag salute that's been agendized.
Okay. Mr. Rosendahl, would you be kind enough to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And if I could ask everybody in council chambers to please rise for the salute to the flag.
Please rise and put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Next order of business, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, do you wish to take up public comment at this time?
Let's run through the agenda and then we'll come back to public comment.
On the regular agenda, items 1 through 21 are items for which public hearings have been held. Item 1 is a commission appointment. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Please, let's hold number 1 on the desk.
And on item 20, the Housing Committee report was submitted without recommendation. A motion will be required.
Okay.
And on item 21, there are 2 reports on file. A motion is also required.
Okay, on items 20 and on 21, are there any
21
motions?
21, move the personnel report, please.
Mr. Zine moves the personnel report on number 21. And on number 20, let's call that special. We hold the ordinances on the desk too until we have 12 members, so that's 2, 3, and 4. That leaves 5 through 19, colleagues. Any specials? Items 5 through 19. Seeing none. Mr. Smith?
15.
Oh, sorry. Number 15 for Mr. Smith. Any other specials?
10 and 15?
Mr. Alarcon?
10. Item 10.
10 for Mr. Alarcon. Any other specials? Yes, Mr. Parks?
17 for Ms. Hahn.
17 by Mr. Parks for Ms. Hahn. And any other specials, Mr. Zine? Sorry?
Did someone call 4?
4 is being held as an ordinance just until we have 12 members, so it doesn't go to a second reading. All right. So we can take 2, 3, and 4 off. Did you want to call 4 specials, Mr. Zine? Because otherwise we'll put on the consent.
The matter's been resolved. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll call 2 and 3 special. And we'll put those together with 20. So any other specials, colleagues? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open the roll, Madam Clerk, on the balance. Close the roll. Please tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 22 through 36 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. Item 23 is confirmation of a city official. Do we wish to hold that on the desk?
Please, let's hold 22 and 23 on the desk. Any other specials, colleagues? I know Mr. Labange, you want 30 and 31. Got those special for you. We've got a number of cards as well.
37.
27, 28, 26, and 31 we'll call special for cards as well as Mr. Labange. Any other specials, colleagues? Yes, Mr. Parks? I'm sorry, 1 second. Can we get the microphone on Mr. Parks? Go ahead.
On 25, we were in the impression that that was coming forward with an ordinance. Is that ordinance attached to the file?
It is. I see no ordinance as a part of this for number 25. Do we, Mr. Clerk, have an ordinance?
No, Mr. President.
Okay.
My understanding is that the report was, those recommendations were made in preparation of the ordinance, and that the ordinance was coming as a package.
For 25?
For 25. That's the one, that's why when we waived it from Budget and Finance, we were advised.
Okay, let's hold that on the desk. We'll try to resolve that issue. Any other specials, colleagues? I think we just have 24, 29, and 32 through 36 left. Seeing no other specials, let's open the roll. Madam Clerk, on the balance. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, those are approved. We'll return back now to general public comment. And start our general comment with Marilyn Jackson.
Good morning, President Garcetti. I'm a resident of Janice Hans area. As I said before, I'm the working poor of South Central Los Angeles, and I had no criminal record from Jordan High School. As you know, every school in the state of California has a parking lot. Jordan High School has a parking lot where those who are smarter drive to school, the middle income catch the bus, and the poor work. The working poor apologizes for going out of the area in the Crenshaw area, in North Hollywood, everywhere. Sometimes we get upset because on the holidays we expect to find food that we can afford, such as Frankfurters, which you changed to turkey franks and wieners, and we get upset, so we go driving out of the area. I feel that no one wants to overcome who they are. They think they do until they rent an apartment, buy a home, or live in the projects. So I want to thank you again for acknowledging the working poor. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could please ask everybody to keep their conversations here to a minimum as well, in order to make sure that we hear the public comment. Zuma Dog is our next speaker.
Yeah, what's up with the Dome City of Los Angeles? Zuma Dog, y'all, time for a little public comment. First of all, let's talk about the Mayor Shady mayoral takeover, AB 1381. It was beat down in court. It was illegal. It was unconstitutional. He spent a lot of money from the city defending this thing in court, challenging it, appealing it. Zuma Dog says, I'd like to see Jack Weiss. He's running for city attorney. Wendy Gruhl, she's running for controller to challenge the mayor and make it. If you can't challenge the mayor on this, you're not going to be able to challenge him when it comes time to do the job. Make him pay back all the money to the general fund that he spent defending an illegal, unconstitutional, shady mayoral takeover. We told you it was unconstitutional. We told you it was illegal. Why don't you listen to the people? And City Council, I'd also like to say that all the answers in this community are sitting right here on this side of the rope. Y'all are shady. You try to milk the funds. You try to ignore laws. You do all kinds of things. I got a little saying. You beat us, but you didn't fool us. Everything you try to do, all your shady tactics, well, Zuma Dog gets a fuck. Hey, I'm trying to talk over here. I can't even hear
Mr. Dog, if you will please keep your comments.
Stop the time.
No, if you will please keep your comments in a more
in a what?
Respectful manner.
Okay, just make sure that you're
it's
not
right there.
I can't hear myself talk. And okay, now let's talk about a few other things. We got the Jack Weiss recall campaign. You should go to recalljackweiss.com and look about that. And also the LA River. It's all shady. How come when you had the presentation of the LA River, you forgot to mention it's the Colorado River with high density housing all over the place? You're not going to have enough water to put through the things. It's so you got track maps going up everywhere. There's not going to be a little piece of green in this whole city except the crack between the sidewalks, the peat moss. Let's talk about Griffith Park and the expansion over there. I don't like the Griffith Park expansion. I heard that there's a monorail. I hear there's a hotel. I hear that there's restaurants. I hear there's an 8-story parking garage going in that master plan. I hope that's not the case because I talked to the fire department and they said there's no room for all that stuff. And how are you going to get 8 stories of cars through that narrow road? And so why don't you start listening to the people a little bit, and then I won't have to come here every day.
Oscar Johnson is our next speaker.
Yes, my name is Oscar Johnson. I'm an activist for homeless in the city of Los Angeles, and I've been trying to respond to our elected officials that we have elected to control the city of Los Angeles, and we have no connection with our district attorney office. We don't have any connection with our mayor office, and we don't have any connection with our public representatives that have been chosen to elect us. We still have overcrowded buses on the MTA. Children under 12 years old riding the bus day and night without company of their parents on the MTA bus. Our MTA drivers don't have identification to identify themselves properly, but seem as though the MTA is just another big corrupt enterprise in the city of Los Angeles ran by our mayor. And also I see where our midnight homeless mission at, how the homeless have been very neglected. Seems as though they just sit in the corral down at the Midnight Mission waiting to die physically for certain reason. I would not dare to try to understand it. But anyway, it was an incident last Friday when our police department came down in front of the place called The Lamp on St. Julius. And they arrested a friend of mine. And what they did, they handcuffed my friend and they drug him about 15 or 20 feet to their car. We have many citizens that seen that. And we have many citizens that's getting tired of the way this government is going in Los Angeles, and we want to take some proper steps towards it so we can be representing more of the people. Because in this day and time, in the 23rd century, we seem as though we're just in another form of a modern-day slave camp. And seem as though your slave camp out here is being very well. They're not saying nothing. They're not doing nothing about oppression. They just feel like, oh, this is just the thing to be from one generation to another generation. Just eat, sleep, and die. But I think a change is going to come because we're not going to be as stupid and as ignorant as you play us to be. We're going to come together and do something about what's happening in Los Angeles and what's happening in the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Through the United States Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Melrose Larry Green is our next speaker. After that will be Noel Weiss.
I'm Melrose Larry. I'm sorry I'm dressed this way, but today's the American Idol finals, and I was down at the Hollywood and Highland trying to see some of the American Idols, and I had a sign that says, if Jordan doesn't win, I'm moving to Iceland. And this got maybe 40 or 50 interviews I did this morning, so I hopped on the subway, thanks to Ed Reyes, his great work at the Metro. I just hopped down here on the subway, and I just wanted to let you know that Sunday I was over at the event that Tom LaBonge put on at the Grove, honoring the sister cities, and it was just wonderful, heartwarming, incredible talent, incredible singing, mariachis. A 7-year-old boy was in the mariachi group playing, and I was there having a great time, and I hope everybody will avail themselves of the events that you all plug on Fridays, because, quite frankly, it was free, it was wonderful. There was a great guitar player from, I believe, from Lithuania. There was a wonderful Korean dance company from South Korea. And, of course, Tom LaBonge was great. The great Frank Motek from KNX was the MC with Tom LaBonge. And Tom deputized me. I did security on the stage, and it was wonderful. I also hope that you will honor the American Idol 10 finalists, because I know all of you watch American Idol. Doesn't matter who you, well, if you don't, Bill, well, you go to meetings, you have a lot more things to do than me. But I love American Idol. I'm a big fan of Sanjaya, particularly. And I hope that you will honor the American Idol finalists. I also want to talk about the corner of Clinton and La Brea. I live right near there. I stand there almost every day when I can. It says no right turn from 1 to 5. It's a school there, a parochial school. People make that right turn 40 to 50 times a day. And I say, this is me at the corner, what part of no right turn don't you understand? Kenny would have loved that, right? Kenny Hahn would have loved that. Anyway, I got 4 more seconds. Tomorrow I meet Condoleezza Rice at the Reagan Library. I'll send her all your best. Thank you very much. I'm Melrose Larry Green.
Noel Weiss is our next speaker. Thank you, Mr. Green. And Arnold Sachs will be after that.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. Good morning, council members. I want to speak today about the mayor's retreat on education policy. Mr. Alarcon introduced a motion which I appreciate very much. However, it's a bit tepid, and I'm hoping that Mr. Alarcon will schedule a hearing in his committee, because the only way basically we're going to be able to move forward on these educational issues is to have some meaningful discussion on public chartering, or the city chartering rather, of public schools. Now, studying is the classic political trick. I'm concerned about your problem. Let's study it. Well, you know what? We've studied. It's time to act, and it's time to move. There are a lot of viable alternatives, and I'm looking hopefully for the leadership of this council in order basically to move those forward. Secondly, any candidate for controller, in my opinion, has to be able to demonstrate some character here. When that mayoral AB 1381 was passed, the city council was told by the CLA that, in effect, the city should not be liable for any dollars spent in connection with that deal. Now, the bottom line is, Valerie Flores has done a fabulous job. That's the city attorney. The mayor, who spent millions on campaign contributions, should basically reimburse the city for her time. And when the city gets sanctioned because of the fact that they pursued an unlawful, unconstitutional course, that could reach $500,000, $1 million. That's a contingent liability. I would expect any candidate for controller or any candidate for city attorney, wherever he is, to basically say, you know what, Mayor, give the money back to the city. You guys are shortfalling your budget. It's time basically to move forward. Lastly, Mr. Rosendahl, thank you very much for introducing finally that Ellis Act resolution. Sheila Kuehl has that bill. Mr. Smith promised me 3 times that he's going to schedule it for hearing in his committee. I hope that he lives up to his promise, and I look forward to working to get the council behind Ellis Act reform in connection with Sheila Kuehl's bill. Thank you very much.
Arnold Sachs is our next speaker, and then we'll go out to Van Nuys with Miriam Fogler following that. Mr. Sachs? Is Mr. Sachs here? Okay, there he is. And then after Miriam Fogler will be Donna Pearman, and then we'll come back here from Michael Carrion.
Mr. President, sir, excuse me, good morning. Would you start my time? I haven't spoken anything. I just approached the lectern.
Go ahead, sir. Start speaking. I'll give you seconds.
Good morning, council members. Thank you very much. I have several things I'd like to talk about. Let's see, I don't know where to start with. I know that item 17 has been held by Mr. Parks, Councilman Parks, but there was an article in the newspaper from May 16th regarding the LAX and their agreement with the rental for the terminals. And the judge characterized LAX, the airport agency's entire accounting system, as suspect and cannot be relied upon to provide accurate and timely information. This is coming from the judge who overheard the case. Yet today on the agenda, the Transportation Committee is okaying a new parking agency to take over the parking facilities for the airport. It's too bad this information wasn't available before the Transportation Committee heard this change in people taking over the airport facilities. This is the second time it happened. It also happened something with the parking people in charge of the parking lots, where the company in charge of the parking lots was found to be in arrears on some money that was owed after the city council passed an ordinance. Thank you very much for hearing. I really appreciate it. Also, again, Metro, raising the fare. All I'm trying to do is find out the last 3 times where the money is going. We have all these different construction authorities, yet none of them are doing any construction. It's too bad we don't have anybody representing the state or who has information from the state legislature on why these construction authorities were founded, yet they weren't obligated to do any business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go back to out to Van Nuys, for Miriam Fogler as our next speaker, and then Donna Pearman. Good morning, Ms. Fogler.
Hi, good morning to everybody. Zuma, you're doing great on your speaking, but you need to, it's more effective. You just don't yell and scream, okay? It's much better than. Otherwise, everybody's been doing great. Thank you. The thing about it is I've noticed all of the waste that's going on here, and I'm asking for your help to save the city the millions and millions of dollars. You went over the budget yesterday, and it didn't look good. A lot of the stuff you're making cutbacks and all this stuff, and it's not good what you did. Yesterday. I'm just not happy with the way the budget's going. That what you're wasting all the money here with all these different projects that you're doing in the city, and yet there is no talk about giving any wage increases for our hardworking men and women who are working for the city, the police officers, our fire department. And you said something about yesterday about the healthcare costs, and also checking their annual. LeBond was wanting to do an annual check on each employee each year. And I think we need to do that for you guys, because you're the employees of the city elected by the people. And even your wages should be controlled by the people, not the Prop H and under the ethics, because the ethics has really no say over what you do. I mean, it's just a figurehead. And you guys, you people over there, you do whatever you want. And your wages should not be what you get, because it's already way high anyway over everybody else, and the city is fine with me as long as it's about, you're more an administrator. No, you're the elected bodies, but you need to know that the elected workers are middle class people, and they need their wage increases, and also their benefits, the health benefits and medicines need to be improved.
Thank you very much. Donna Pearman is our next speaker. And Michael Carrion here. Good morning.
Anyway, what I want to talk about is the bus-only lane for Wilshire. First, I'd like to thank Congressman LeBon for saying it needs to be studied more, a lot more. It would be terrible. Traffic on Wilshire Boulevard, especially in the afternoon, is already horrible. Cars already stalled and can't move near Westwood Boulevard. What would happen if you go, it's one lane for buses? Cars will accidentally drive there, will be accidents and flare-ups. I take the bus, but you have to think of everybody, not just the bus riders. I certainly don't want bus-only lanes in the San Fernando Valley. Also, what is this? Spread the misery is not the answer. The subway to the sea is not the answer. But I know the bus-only lane is coming to your attention. I need you to study it more, a lot more. Don't rubber stamp it. People will not get out of the cars, especially with that huge MTA bus fare increase dated July, which is horrible for disabled students, aged and poor, and the middle class. It's bad for everyone. I don't mind an increase, but why did they allow them to more than double it? Now you let them take their own lane. It looks good on paper and makes you look like you care for the poorest and the minorities, but guess what? Poor people and minorities drive too, even along Wilshire Boulevard in West Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, and downtown. Bus-only lanes along Wilshire will be more destructive than good. And also the cost of implementing it costs in the millions just to add a lane from Federal to Barrington. Not that far of a distance when it's not needed just because of a bus-only lane. Please, congressmen and women, drive along Wilshire Boulevard and tell me if you like the lane you're driving in to shrink because that lane belongs to a bus. And if you only take Wilshire Boulevard to the city council, believe me, it will be harder to get a quorum. We do need you. You are our only hope. Congressman Parks, you like to call complicated law special to study it? This needs it. Mr. Garcetti and the City Council, I know deep down you care about us. Please help us. Believe me, it's not easy for me to say it because I would love a quick bus ride, but it's not at the expense of everyone along Wilshire Boulevard. Stop this from happening. People will be happy with you and businesses too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Michael Carrion is our next speaker here, and then Terry Wilburn.
Yes, my name is Michael Carrion, and I'm from the 14th District. This past week, we had a what they call a cleanup in my community. The Los Angeles Police Department went and impounded everything that apparently was outdated. Didn't have tags or nothing. When you get to the police department, or first of all, when you get to the impound yard, they have no record of your vehicle being there because they keep their paperwork for 4, 5, 6, 10 hours. Then, when you finally do find out that your car's there, they want to charge you for a second day. When you get to the police station, it's funny that nobody's paying attention, but I brought this to you guys before. The police department breaks the same rules that they enforce. They park in the red, they park in the hydrants, they endanger the lives, especially Hollenbach Police Station, now it's under construction, are endangering the lives of the communities. But again, nobody wants to hear that. So maybe if we break it down to a different reason, why is it okay for Hollenbach to do that? Because it's in a prominently Mexican community. If it was in Van Nuys, it wouldn't be done. If it was in an all-white community, it wouldn't be done. But since in the Mexican community, it's okay to endanger the lives of the community. I see some people nodding their heads and other people just continuing talking. Your conversation, I understand, I see you listening. One of the very few people that does listen most of the time. The point I'm making, gentlemen and ladies, is that we are hypocrites here in this horseshoe. If you don't do nothing about it, you're part of the problem. You people are elected to represent us. We come to you with our problems, and our problems fall on deaf ears. Most of you have your individual agendas. They have nothing to do with the community. Get out in the community and ask the community what they want a little more often.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion. Our next speaker is Terry Wilburn.
Yes, my name is Terry Wilburn. Morning, Council, and everyone.
Good morning.
I'd like to speak on several things, too. The poor people is fine. The transportation is barely okay. But I really want to speak to concerning 400 and something bodies that I receive or have, and the bus company is paying and to ignore these facts. Now, for years, over 100 years, people have been killing one another in Baldwin Hills. And the way they are doing it, and the cocaine drive is there. I busted 2 people there, and they got out free. Nothing going on, okay? Now, you had a commissioner that just was killed based on an investigation that I was doing, that Baldwin Hill involved himself in. You got 3 black men locked up where it was 2 Mexicans and 1 man, 1 black man. Okay. Now, in doing so, that's your thing, your random stuff. Okay. But Baldwin Hill is no joke. They are raping people, killing people, and bribing people for years, as long. And Mr. Park, I just found out they want to murder you from 77th Division. And if you don't believe me, I do have witnesses. Okay. More so, there's a girl named Cheryl Hollins. She's being raped and abused over there. I can't go over there, okay? Which I asked your police, who would be receiving $400 million for doing nothing, okay? To ignore these facts. You got the Lakers pushing cocaine there, and y'all ain't doing a damn thing about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That closes our general public comment. If we can take up our commissioner first.
First item is item 1, and that's the appointment of Mr. Jaime Rodriguez to the Relocation Appeals Board.
Okay. And I'm sorry, but just before that, yes, my apologies. Mr. Reyes wanted to respond to one thing in public comment. First, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. Colleagues and those in the public, if you hear something over and over and over again, folks tend to believe it. I want to be emphatic that the Los Angeles River community plan will reflect each neighborhood's priorities, whether it be open space, whether it be mixed use, whether it be housing. That will be defined in the process over time. But we do have an individual who continues to emphasize one dynamic, and I just felt compelled to respond to it, because if you hear it enough, folks tend to believe it. And I just want to be very clear that every area along the river will be a reflection of what the community stakeholders want to see in the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our first commissioner. Welcome. We have Jaime Rodriguez for the Relocation Appeals Board, and wanted to welcome you and thank you for your service. And I'll recognize Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rodriguez was in the committee this morning, and I was able to chair as Mr. Wesson had a meeting. And Mr. Rodriguez came in and spoke a bit about his educational credentials and gave us some insight as to why he wanted to be on this commission. So if you would, Mr. Rodriguez, just share with those listening what you shared with us this morning in committee.
Sure. My name is Jaime Rodriguez. I grew up here in the city of Los Angeles, Mount Washington area. Currently reside in the Silver Lake area. I attended Loyola High School, Berkeley undergrad, and Harvard Law School. After law school, I came back to LA. I've worked at a couple of law firms here in downtown on infrastructure, financing, and development, so I definitely have the professional background. As a lifelong resident of LA, I can also appreciate the need to protect homeowners' rights. At the same time, see that smart and well-planned projects get developed. My grandparents were gentrified out of the Rampart area after 40-plus years living in rental housing there. But at the same time, I commute every day from Silver Lake to Westchester on the streets of LA, so I see the need for finding that balance.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry, and thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Panorama Terrace.
CD13. Proud resident CD4? I didn't hear what street. Mr. Lebons, the council
First, I
member.
rise to salute a Loyola club from Loyola High School, very good there. But also, he grew up in the best street in Silver Lake, Panorama Terrace, right there, or live on Panorama Terrace, where Mrs. Ludlow used to live there on the corner, brick house, beautiful house. I grew up 3 doors from that. Thank you. This is a good commissioner who's going to do a great job for the city of Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, let's go ahead and open the roll.
And Mr. President, just for the council's information, this is for the original term that ended April 2nd of this year and for the subsequent 2-year term ending April 2nd, 2009.
Great. Okay. Let's open the roll, Madam Clerk. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Congratulations, Mr. Rodriguez, please. A round of applause for our commissioner. Next, we have items number 10 and 17, I think, have been resolved. So if we can go ahead and take those 2 up next. If nobody wishes to be heard on that, let's go ahead and open up the roll on 10 and 17, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay. That is approved. If we can take up 22 and 23 next. And I do believe, let's see, we do not have any cards on those, so the public hearing will be open and closed. And anybody wishing to say anything on number 22 on the interim general manager, Mr. Lebonge?
Thank you very much. If I could ask Kathy Jones-Irish to approach the center table.
When she agreed to be interim, she said no discussion here in the middle of the horseshoe.
A great selection to help the mayor and the city and the council with our newly appointed general manager who's scheduled to start August 1st. The mayor has tapped Kathy Jones-Irish, who has a great history of service in this city and council offices and my office. Also a very great history with water and power. In the private sector now, and her company has allowed her to take a leave of absence. A great graduate of Occidental College here in Los Angeles, a classmate of Mike Hernandez, if I believe correctly. Kathy's going to serve the city well. So, Kathy, if you'd like to just say a few words, I ask for an aye vote all the way around.
Please.
Good morning, Mr. President,
Good
members
morning.
of the City Council. It is indeed a pleasure to be back. I am very, very moved by the mayor's decision to appoint me to this position, and I am very anxious to serve, albeit the fact that it is for 8 weeks. I am looking forward to meeting with all of the council offices, working with the staff, and supporting the mayor's vision for the Cultural Affairs Department. I'm very excited for the city because I have met with Olga Garay. She's an exciting person, and we'll be working arm in arm together in the next 8 weeks. So it's just a pleasure to be back, and I'd like to thank the mayor. It's indeed a compliment to be considered and a privilege to serve. And I'd like to also thank the executives of MWH for giving me the leave of absence to come and serve the city again.
Thank you, Ms. Irish, very much, and thank your company for giving you a leave of absence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lebonge, and thank you, Ms. Irish. Mr. Zine, and then Mr. Reyes.
Thank you. I'd like to echo compliments. I'm sad it's not a permanent position, because I know when you were with Councilmember Lebonge's office, you were always very efficient getting things done. And I'll never forget the day at the zoo where you tried to plug that electric car in that and it didn't work.
Right.
And we tried to fix it, and now those electric cars have basically vanished except for Mr. Garcetti's. The rest of them have vanished from the planet. But I know that your qualifications, your love for the city, and your ability to get things done there in that particular department, which has gone through some peaks and valleys over the years. You're well aware of what the city's all about, and I am happy to see your smiling face back, because you've always got that smile to say, we're going to get it done, we're going to make it happen. So welcome back to the city family.
Thank you very much.
Even though short time, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. You'll be happy to know that the Department of Water and Power just purchased or leased another 150 electric vehicles, so they're on their way back. Mr. Reyes.
Yes. Thank you, Council President. 8 weeks, correct? Interim?
Yes.
8 weeks. well, I know you do a lot in those 8 weeks, but I do want to just suggest one thing, knowing how your wide range of experience working with the council as a chief of staff, working in the MTA, and all the great public service work you've done, community service. I want to pose a question to you, and I'm not sure if you can even reach it in those 8 weeks, but certain parts of the city are park poor. They have very limited social programs, especially art, music, in the more impoverished parts of town. We have a tendency to look at our art fees from developments. It gets put into one major pool, and then it would spread out through the whole city. If there is any way in these 8 weeks you can just look at that policy and just get a response as to how do we even out the city when certain parts have more than enough. There's a lot of programs out there, a lot of facilities, underused facilities because there's not as many children. Other parts are bursting in the seams and they don't have enough money for supplies. So how do we address that inequity? I know it could be a Pandora's box, but it's just something that I feel we need to put a focus on. And I don't know if they even can just give it a broad brush in those 8 weeks, even just to see how that's allotted. And that's just something that I would hope you might find time in your schedule in those 8 weeks to probably go like a blink of an eye.
Councilman, I will look into this.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I will look into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I certainly rise to support this very brief interim appointment. I think you are absolutely perfectly suited for this particular department. I know we have traveled together. We spent time with the former general manager, Margie Reese, and so I think you have a great understanding of this department. You have a great understanding of how important cultural affairs is, not only throughout the city of Los Angeles, but in terms of our position even on the international stage. And so I think even in 8 weeks, you're going to do a great job. I want to get you to the 15th district and have an opportunity to tell you about the great opportunities we have in that council district, both from Watts to San Pedro, in terms of some really important projects in cultural affairs. So I think this is great. Welcome back to the City family. You have a great knowledge of the City family, but more importantly, you have a great ability to get things done. And it takes someone like you, I think, to step in. And it's a great act of really courage on your part to come in for 8 weeks and not only just stand there and be a placeholder, but I don't think you're going to do that. I think you're going to come in and really kind of make some difference even in 8 weeks. And so you're perfect for this opportunity. We appreciate your willingness to do it. A lot of people wouldn't do that. You have a great job in the private sector, and there's a lot of people that would not have the courage to come in for 8 weeks to step in to a department as big as cultural affairs. So thank you for doing that, Kathy. I think you're going to be perfect. I wish it was longer than 8 weeks because I think you're perfectly suited for this. So congratulations. I support you wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Hahn.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn, and thank you, members. It was great to see Ms. Irish back here. And with that, we'll go ahead and open the roll. On the confirmation, please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Hope the 8 weeks goes well.
Forthwith.
Without objection, we'll send forthwith. Time is of the essence when you only have 8 weeks. Next item is item 23, please, if we can take that up.
And that is the permanent appointment of Mr. Rafael Lopez as the Executive Director of the Commission for Children, Youth, and Their Families.
Okay. Mr. Lopez, would like to come forward. And Mr. Labange, as soon as you are done there, we'll call on you. I know this came through the Arts and Parks Committee, so I'd like to recognize Mr. Labange again, and then we'll turn to Mr. Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Rafael Lopez has had the position in an intern. This is a permanent position. He has passion. He has communication. And the most important thing, I think you've tried to organize the young people of this city to try to get them involved and engaged in the process of government. Give us a little update on your progress so far.
Certainly. Is this on?
Honorable members of the City Council, good morning and thank you for having me before you this morning. The item to which Councilmember LaBonge refers is actually a really amazing restructuring of our City's of Los Angeles Youth Council. One of the things that we're doing is actually dramatically rethinking how we can engage more and more young people between 14 and 22 years of age in the city and actually form the first ever Congress of Los Angeles Youth. We have a team of young people who are new to the Youth Council, who are working very hard evenings and weekends with myself and very talented members of our staff who are rethinking this, and we hope to debut their restructuring efforts in the next month or two. There's a task force, and they'll be bringing recommendations, and one of the things they would like to do, so that you all know, is meet with you more often and to get your advice and counsel about what it's like to be a member of the City Council, but more importantly, what it's like to create policy that does impact youth in the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning, Councilmember.
I want to compliment you on your style and your aggressiveness and your ability to break through those barriers and make an impact. I've seen you in action and very impressed with what you're doing. So I think this is another wonderful appointment by the mayor. An individual who's got a lot of passion for that particular commission to bring it to the light that it needs to be, bring it to the exposure it needs to be, and the effectiveness. And I think it's been a sleeping giant for a long time, and you're going to bring it out of that environment. So congratulations and continue the progress.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you and your staff.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Ms. Gruhl is next, then Mr. Cardenas and Mr. Weezer after that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I, too, want to rise in support of this permanent appointment. We met when you were first assigned temporarily, and your commitment during an interim period with no guarantee that you would be the final selection. And you did the kind of work, I think, that is critically important. And this commission, as we have talked about, has the greatest potential, I believe, in the City of Los Angeles to do more. And not only because of your appointment, but the commissioners that you have and the interest that we see here in the City of Los Angeles on the issues of children and families and the coordination. You came before our budget committee, and I think all I can say is that you wowed us in your explanation about how important this commission and the role of that commission and how important it was to interact with all of the other city departments. And that I think the time has come for us to not only invest in this department to be able to coordinate some of those efforts, but challenge our other departments to work more closely with you. And as we talk about the gang issue, we all know that prevention starting with young children, starting in those youth councils that, as you know, there are 3 of us here that were part of the old version, or the younger version maybe, of the mayor's, at that time, Mayor's Office of Youth Development and the Youth Council that was established. And so we're excited about what you see as the future of this city, and to model best practices as to some of the other cities and to involve the community. I know you shared a bit in Budget Committee about your vision as to engaging the public. Could you share a little bit with us as well?
Certainly.
And just hold my time.
Certainly. There's a couple of ways in which we can do that. And one of the things that's critical is actually looking at how we can be more strategic about aligning and coordinating our services and programs across the city, particularly in partnering with departments like DUN, the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. There's a new general manager there, Carol Baker Tharp. And one of the things that we've discussed in both of our newness, if you will, is how we can do better at connecting to the nearly 90 neighborhood councils across the city of Los Angeles. And CCYF can be the in-house sort of city hall expertise, technical advisor on youth development issues, so that we could first of all look at how we can secure a young person or 2 or 3 on every single one of those neighborhood councils. How is it that we can at the neighborhood level engage more young people, both in the planning and the practice of policy around the city, and actually in planning for not only new programs, but actually when the council and the mayor seeks advice, to have ways in which neighborhoods and families connect on a more strategic and aligned way. That's one of the many ways we're looking at in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment and its new leadership leadership have already stepped up to the plate. And next week, I believe, we have our first meeting on the calendar to think about how to do that. When we figure that out, we're going to bring that to the council as a way to engage all of you and the neighborhood councils that are in each of your council districts.
Well, that's very important because I know in the neighborhood councils that I represent, very few of them have representation by young people in that effort. And so I think it is critically important. And the relationship that you want to establish as well as you talk about partnerships with LA Up and First Five.
Oh, yes.
And the importance of universal preschool, the importance of that connection, the importance to coordinate with LA's Best that exists, or the Bridges program, and how our commission can elevate that issue, I think, to the next level, which is critically important in the relationship with LAUSD. It's again, I think we're at a crossroads, and what I've experienced with you and your leadership, and particularly during the budget, was that we're going in the right direction. You've chosen that right road and are going down a path. So I'm very excited about your appointment and our ability to work together. So look forward to you coming back to us, challenging us on the council to say, you know what, we need to invest here. Here are some partnerships. We need your help. And not to think you have to do it all on your own.
Exactly.
And to use some of those great commissioners like Bobby Parks and that commission. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas is our next speaker.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Lopez, for offering yourself to be interim director, but at the same time, I'm very happy to see that you're going to be with us more permanently. When we had the committee hearing where you came forth and expressed some of your views and the way in which you think we should and could participate together, that was very refreshing. And also your experience, having worked with another city down the coast, or up the coast, I should say, has been very valuable to us. So welcome. Thank you very much. And I think everything should go well for you today.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Huizar.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations, Mr. Lopez, on your appointment. I'm watching your commission quite closely. It's a commission, or that's a department. What do we call it?
It's a commission, but I think one of the things we need to do is change it to a department in the future.
Okay, there you go. There shows your aggressive attitude. And it's a commission that's near and dear to my wife's heart. She spent about 10 years there, and so she asked me to particularly pay attention to this commission as I go forward. But I, too, was impressed with your responses at the Budget Committee. I think you handled those very well, and that you do have a vision for this department. I'm particularly excited about your idea of having or serving as a depository for council members and the city's interest to go there and find information or ideas on how to best serve our families and children in the city. And through the budget process, you also got additional responsibilities, Kid Watch, and you're going to reorganize through this process, so we're looking forward to the outcome of that. Thank you for your service, and I hope to continue in close contact so that we continue to find ways to work closer with the school district. As you know, the aerial bombing has stopped over there, and now we have a partnership as the tone that a lot of us are taking to work closer with them. Lots of opportunities, lots of people talk about it, but I think your commission is one of those critical points for the city to make that happen.
Absolutely.
We talk a lot about joint use in terms of physical facilities, but I think equally important is the programming that could go with that, and how we work with our gangs and youth, because after all, our children spend most of the day at our schools. We hope they stay there, don't leave our schools, but your commission working with the school district could really have an impact in our efforts to reduce gang activity throughout the city. So congratulations. We look forward to your leadership.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you and your staff.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. Our next speaker is Ms. Hahn, and then Mr. Reyes after that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I rise as well to completely support your permanent appointment to this position. Just listening to you, particularly and Ms. Gruhl's comments and questions, you're exactly in the right place at the right time for the future of the city of Los Angeles. Again, I think we're at such a great moment in the city's history where we're all begun to have this civic debate on how do we end gang violence in Los Angeles. And I agree with Ms. Gruhl that it's about prevention. I think our only hope is to grow up a generation of young people who will decide not to be recruited by gang members. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of reaching out, and it takes a lot of investing in our young people. And what I've heard you say it really thrills my heart. I'm involved right now with two task force in my city council district. One is the Watts Gang Task Force, and the other is the Harbor Gateway Task Force. And both of those came together grassroots in response to some particularly violent times in both of those communities. And we find ourselves sitting around the table, it's mainly adults, talking about what the young people want or need. And every once in a while we're stopped in our tracks because every once in a while a young person wanders in and says, wait a minute, have you talked to us yet? You guys can sit around all day and decide what we want, but have you really talked to us? And I think that's what we're hearing, is that our young people have not had a voice at the table. And I think neighborhood councils is a perfect place to start. One of the things we're hesitant to do is sort of mandate the structure of neighborhood councils, because they're all unique, they're all different, each neighborhood is unique, one size doesn't fit all. But the neighborhood councils that have allocated a slot on the board for a young person, I think are in the right direction. And if every neighborhood council in the city actually left one board seat open, only to be filled by someone, 20 years and younger, I think that's a good start. And that would force young people in a particular neighborhood to run for a seat on the board. And I think until that happens, it's going to be difficult to engage them. But I hope you'll look at that. And I hope that you'll get your commission involved in these two task forces that I have in my council district to see how we might not change the future for the young people in both Watts and the Harbor Gateway area for a life of peace as opposed to a life of violence. So I think you have a great role ahead of you. I really am supportive of you, and I hope I'll be able to spend more time with you and your commission.
Absolutely.
And how we might really redirect the energies of our young people in Los Angeles.
Anytime.
Congratulations.
I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes is our last speaker.
Thank you, Council President. First, I want to thank you. I want to thank your wife for sharing you with us and your family. It's a beautiful baby.
Thank you.
But I do want to ask you a couple of questions regarding your familiarity with our work, the gang report, Connie Rice. Can you just speak to that and hold my time? Are you familiar with it?
Absolutely. We're very quite familiar. Early on when I was here, I met with Connie Rice Advancement Project to first take a look at how they were structuring the report. And one of the things that we found that was quite interesting was the lens through which we were looking at the work, which is actually the lens of prevention, not just intervention suppression. So we actually had ongoing dialogue around how CCYF can best position itself to align its work into the future around the different kinds of programs that are happening around the city and how we can reimagine the Commission for Children, Youth, and Their Families in terms of restructuring not only our organization, which we're doing this next fiscal year, but our staffing structure to better meet your needs as a council as well as the mayor's office in trying to achieve multiple goals. That's really critical to this work. One of the things that we found alarmingly well, and if you ask any general manager in the city of Los Angeles, the plethora of requests that we got in those last couple of weeks to meet your needs as a council, whether at the Budget and Finance Committee or your staffs, were numerous, from the CLA's office, the CAO, or the mayor. And one of the reasons why those requests kept coming through was because there wasn't a way in which we could capture the kind of investments that the city was already making around gang violence prevention issues, whether through the prevention end and youth development or the intervention and suppression end. This June, we will debut something that we've worked on internally with no new net cost to the city, with a group of very talented USC interns and ITA, and we're going to launch something internal that'll be a web-based way in which to capture and track investments, which has never been done before in the city of LA. That kind of innovative work is what I think is the beginning of this of the gang work for the future. If we do not know how to work smarter and leaner and more efficiently, we will constantly be chasing ourselves every time there's a death in Los Angeles. And I think that's not acceptable here. So in terms of the report, quite familiar, and look forward to working with you and your staff around how better to meet the needs.
This past Saturday, we opened up a park we call Hope and Peace. 2 lots that used to be abandoned structures, gang violence. A few years back, there was a little girl, 6, 7 years old, that was shot and killed, crossfire between gang members. It took us from point of conception to implementation 14 years. $1.3 million over that period of time. This office in District 1, through different administrations, continued that link. Yet in Staples Arena, it was built in 1 year, a multi-million-dollar project. So to me, it speaks to how we prioritize our business in the city and how we look at our population and who is listened to and who's not. What I like to see from your group, if I may, is how we start looking at the Trust for Public Lands, Rec and Parks, and start coordinating these opportunities in conjunction with the council offices. Trust for Public Lands has been out there for a few years. Rec and Parks is struggling to keep its programs alive. Your commission has the ability to do what you just described, but wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to wait 14 years for a pocket park that kids can play in the most park-poor and dense areas of the city? And that, I'm hoping we can see with the advent of technology, the ability to coordinate and look at how we can move these pieces. Because I really believe we need to start shifting our resources in a way where we end up with results and not have to wait 14 years for Pocket Park.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I look forward to working with you to achieve that goal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Alarcon?
Mr. Lopez, as chair of the Education Neighborhood Council Committee, obviously we're going to be working a lot together. Since I just started, I haven't had the opportunity to have extensive dialogue with you, and I'm looking forward to that. But I have to tell you, based on everybody's comments here, half the job is done in terms of my interview, and I'm very excited about the possibilities. Obviously, we have a very dynamic city at this particular time. Education is a critical issue, and the school board, the new school board that will be in place very shortly, will indicate perhaps a new direction for the city of Los Angeles, particularly because of the alliances that have been made with the administration here at the city and the majority of school board members. So I would like to understand how you perceive your role as we go through this transition.
Absolutely. Well, one of the roles we were about to discuss in your committee just the other morning, and actually, even though there wasn't action at the moment, the elements of the report from the chief from the CLA speak to the kinds of things that we should be doing in the future, which is how can this city council and the mayor's office more accurately and strategically align its resources with the Los Angeles Unified School District. We're one of the few major cities in the nation that hasn't completely figured this out yet, and as the second largest city in the nation, we need to do a better job of coordinating that. I've already met with incoming board member Yoli Flores Aguilar. We've talked with board member Monica Garcia, and CCYF should be your partner to help negotiate and navigate those issues between the city and the school district, whether on joint use projects, on joint planning, on the use of joint facilities, to extend the hours of the school in terms of having more time after school and into the evening, whether it's co-locating services, the way in which our libraries, parks and recreation services, and those programs offered by CDD. There is a plethora of opportunities for this city to engage the Los Angeles Unified School District, and I look forward to the new leadership on the board to make that partnership happen. I think that that's one of the ways in which this city council can be truly innovative, is to think outside of how cities have traditionally worked with school districts, move beyond the notion of a memorandum of understanding, and actually have some ongoing and regular dialogues, whether it's at the elected level, the staff-to-staff level, or at the line staff level. That's the only way in which we're going to be able to actually affect change long-term with the LAUSD.
And obviously, the gang violence issue is primary. Many of my colleagues have covered that. Having worked for many years in that subject area myself, dating back to 1981 with Mayor Bradley, I can tell you that there is no more daunting challenge than dealing with the issues of gang violence and combined with the issue of education. So you have taken on a major task, and I hope that at the end of your term, however long that is, that you'll have that same smile because it will be a smile of success that we have reduced gang violence in our communities and that we have in fact improved educational opportunities for all the kids so that they won't choose gang violence and gang-related activities. So I commend you, congratulate you in advance, and am pleased to support you. I look forward to working with you.
Likewise.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. That's our last speaker from the council. So with that, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Congratulations. You've been approved as a permanent general manager.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We have items 26 and 27, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Reyes wanted to continue those, is that correct?
That is correct, for 60 days.
Okay. Is there any objection, colleagues, to continuing 26 and 27 for 60 days? Seeing none, that will be continued till July 24th. Now we can return. Let's take up 2, 3, and 20 together. And we do have public comment cards. We held a public hearing, but there have been some changes as well, so we will be reopening public hearing. If there's no objection, we'll do for 10 minutes, 5 minutes to each side. We do have about 37 cards. There's a 24 on the for side and 12 on the against side, and I believe one other that's just a general public comment that was not marked one way or the other. So we'll go ahead and we'll start. We'll ask folks to keep their comments to a minute apiece. Noel Weiss will be our first speaker on the for side. After that will be Blanca Salazar and Joe Hari. Those are the first 3 speakers.
Council members, this whole situation reminds me of the Peanuts cartoon where Charlie Brown tries to kick the football that Lucy's holding, and just before he comes up to kick the football, she pulls it out from under him. This is probably, 7 or 8 times this thing has been continued, and I think at this point, hopefully, the council can move forward. Finally, Wayne Gretzky was good because he didn't go for where the puck was. He went for where he thought the puck was going to go. What we're talking about here is a commitment in the face of uncertainty. This thing needs to get passed pure. Now, what we have done going forward, is basically what we're talking about is having formerly Ellis buildings having new apartments being subject to rent stabilization. Now, if and to the extent that we can't reach some kind of accommodation here, I think it would be a terrible circumstance for the council. And frankly, I think in terms of Mr. Parks's proposed amendments, what this would do is offer an opportunity to try to tie up with the tenants. You have interest between the tenants, you have interest with the landlord. There's no reason here in this Thank you.
Thank you. Blanca Salazar, the next speaker.
If it's okay, I'll translate for Blanca.
Yeah, and what we do is we usually do a minute for her comments, and then we'll give you a minute to translate it. Could we get the microphone over there so we can, the handheld? We can make it a little easier for you so we can... Hold on one moment. Why don't you go ahead? We'll start just with the two of you there. Thank you.
Sí, buenas tardes. Gracias por darme el tiempo de poder presentarme aquí. Soy Blanca Salazar, vivo en el área 301 Nor Alvarado Street. Soy una de las personas que nos han desalojado del edificio, el nuevo dueño, y tengo ya voy a tener ya 1 año de andar buscando una vivienda. Soy madre de 2 niños y se me ha hecho muy difícil buscar un lugar económico para vivir, porque también estoy deshabilitada de una operación que me hicieron mal y necesito una ayuda.
Okay, I'm going to translate that. Basically, good morning. Her name is Blanca Salazar. She wants to thank you for this opportunity for her to speak. She lives at 301 North Alvarado, and they are evicting her from her apartment because of a condo conversion. She's been looking for a year for a place to live and has not been able to find something. She's disabled, which makes it even more difficult.
Sí, mi pedido es de que poder tener la ayuda de ustedes, de encontrar un lugar donde pueda yo poder sobrevivir. He sido una persona muy trabajadora, pero lamentablemente por mi situación de deshabilidad, de un error que cometieron en mi cirugía, yo no puedo trabajar mucho y necesito la ayuda de ustedes de que puedan haber lugares de bajos recursos para poder sobrevivir.
She had an operation, and because the operation didn't go well, she's not able to work, but she is someone who works very hard. She's asking for your help to find a place where she can survive with her family.
Gracias por escucharme y espero tener buenas noticias en el futuro.
Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope to have good news in the future.
Thank you. Joe Hari is our third speaker on the for side, and then we'll go to the against side.
Thank you, President Garcetti. On the one side, we have the tenants. On the other side, we have the developers. In Los Angeles, we have rent stabilization. This law is to close a loophole where landlords can get around the intent of the law. Based on what President Garcetti has said, both sides have been listened to. I don't know exactly what the bottom line is for developers. What I do see as an organizer is the pain of families. What happens to a family that is evicted from an $800 unit? Blanca's neighbor could only find a $1,600 unit. They wanted to stay in the neighborhood because their daughter just became a manager of McDonald's, and they don't want their 9-year-old daughter to be uprooted from their school. Where does that extra $800 come from? They are being squeezed. One person's profit margin is another family's breaking point. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three speakers are Phyllis Doherty. Phyllis Doherty is next, and then Christopher Thornburg and Robert Bradford will be the next three speakers.
Phyllis Doherty. I'm here today as a member of AGLA and also as property owner. I own rental property in the 13th, 14th, and 4th District. I have sold property from other areas. I am now investing out of Los Angeles, unfortunately, because of this type of thing. And I don't want you to drive other people away who have been born and raised here, who provide low-income housing because we want to. I do not raise the rent on my tenants even as I'm allowed to. So you're driving all of us out. Owning an investment property is a risk. It's not necessarily a profit. Please do not discourage the renovation of the neighborhoods, which reduces crime and provides a good place for the children to grow up with hope.
Christopher Thornburg is our next speaker.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for giving me a minute here. I've been studying real estate in Los Angeles for a number of years, and I was one of the first, of course, to predict the bubble, and also the first to predict the current crisis we have in housing in Los Angeles. When I say crisis, I'm not talking about rising rents. Rising rents is a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. The real disease, the real problem we have in Los Angeles is a critical lack of workforce housing. A lack of housing driven in large part by very restrictive zoning boards at a local level that serve basically to restrict densification, which we so desperately need. The result of this in 2000 was that Los Angeles has the worst crowded housing problem in the nation, Los Angeles County. Now, as we look forward and how to deal with this particular problem, rent control is not the way to deal with it because of the fact that rent control will in fact shrink the demand for constructing more apartments even more. Right now, we have the solution is very simple. They got to limit the power of zoning boards, restrict construction, reduce densification, and get more. You know what I'm starting to say here, okay? The point is rent control is going to make the situation worse, not make the situation better. And I really hope that we can have proper policy to fix this problem for Los Angeles' future.
Thank you very much. Robert Bradford is our next speaker.
Where are we on?
Robert Bradford? Is it Robert Bradford out there? If not, we'll go to... Okay.
Hello. I'm a longtime resident of a large rent-controlled building in downtown Los Angeles. I've seen my historic neighborhood evolve from block after block of boarded-up buildings barely more than 5 years ago to one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in Southern California. If it weren't for rent control, I couldn't stay in the apartment where I've lived for 16 years. It's rapidly reaching the point where it takes 2 six-figure incomes to afford an apartment in my neighborhood. Rental housing is at critical mass. Here's the key issue. Rent control is the only thing resembling equity that renters get. It's the only way we participate in the security and stability of real property, of that most fundamental commodity, the place where we live. Please close loopholes that allow buildings to be unfairly removed from the rental market. And please listen to your voters and constituents on this very critical issue, which sets critical precedents for the livability of this city for the majority of its people.
Thank you. Tara Bannister. Tara Bannister, you're next, and then we'll go to Lisa Barrett.
Good morning, council members. My name is Tara Bannister. I'm the executive director of the California Apartment Association in Los Angeles, and thank you for letting me speak here today. We stand very firmly against any extension of rent control as a bad policy, a bad economic policy and a bad social policy. It does not protect seniors, it does not protect low income, and it does not protect any disabled people. However, we are absolutely for anything that would help protect the seniors, disabled, and low-income people in this wonderful city of ours. We are also for the 4-unit exemption for the owner-occupied, and we appreciate your support on those items. LA is a wonderful city of which we all live, and whatever we can do to make LA more affordable and create more affordable housing and a better place to live, I thank you for your help on that.
Thank you. Lisa Barrett.
Thank you, Council, for your many years of consideration of this issue. Councilmember Perry spoke very eloquently this morning in Housing Committee about the need for us to sustain and grow and preserve the mixed income nature of our neighborhoods, not just the racial and ethnic diversity that we so need, but also the economic diversity that we need. Our concern from Bethesda Legal Services is the exemption for owner occupation. We, unfortunately, in our eviction defense work, see a great deal of owner occupation fraud. Many times a new owner comes into the property and they use other methods. You're not supposed to have pets, even though it's in your lease. You shouldn't park in the garage, even though it's in your lease. You shouldn't have a guest, even though it's your mother coming by to help care for the kids during the day. And when all else fails, we see owner occupation used. So if we're going to go in that direction, we please encourage you to monitor and keep track and prevent fraud in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. We have now gone over 10 minutes of public hearing. If there's nobody wishes to extend, I'd like to read all the names into the record of folks who have filled out cards. On the for side, Shashi Hanuman was here, Deanna Kitamura, Jean Black, Abdullah Muhammad, Deborah Burton, Becky Dennison, Antonio Martinez, Araceli Leon, Esmeralda Benitez, Claudia Gomez, Maria Mesa, Azucena Morales, Jessica Guriel, Kenya Althocer, Guillermo Batista, Leonardo Vilches, Babette Dickerson, Larry Taylor, Roger Pena, Spartacus Cacao. On the against side, Vic Vierik, Linda Hollenbade, excuse me if I mispronounced that, Jim Clark, Richard Otterstrom, Sam Garrison, David Brackett, Tony Hagrib, and Audrey Stanzer. And then general comments was Zuma Dog. So with that, we'll close the public hearing on that, and I'll hand it over to Councilwoman Perry.
Mr. Garcetti will be our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you. I know how frustrating a minute can be, so I appreciate people with the public comment, and we appreciate the many public hearings we've had over the last 4 or 5 years on this issue, and in the last 8 months as we've been working on this. Colleagues, we worked very hard, I know, last week on this, and we seem to have come to a good place where there seems to be consensus, maybe not 100%, but very close to 100%. And we have before us the copy of the ordinance that we asked that includes the provision for the mom and pop's exemption for 4 units or less for owner occupied, and the rest of it is there. So first and foremost at the outset, I'd like to move item number 3, we receive and file 2 and 20, which were earlier versions. Item 3 is the ordinance as we asked for. Just a couple things, because I think we covered a lot of ground last week, and it was a very good debate, and we really had appreciated everybody that had turned out to be here. You probably saw today the Los Angeles Times editorial that encouraged very succinctly in the beginning of this, by closing a legal loophole, the City Council can help balance tenant rights and the need for housing. It starts with months of City Council effort to balance tenant protections against the need for more and better housing in Los Angeles, which I don't necessarily agree are always against one another, but the need to balance that, have produced a narrowly tailored proposal to close a subtle loophole in rent stabilization laws. The Council should pass it. Not that we always necessarily take our lead from LA Times editorials, but this, I think, particularly puts the quandary that we have here in a good light. And its last paragraph read, "The quandary about the lack of affordable housing won't end with this ordinance, which slows but does not help the inevitable decline in the number of rent-stabilized apartments in Los Angeles. A limited number of renters will see relief for a limited number of time, making it imperative for the city to remain engaged with builders in straight talk about how to best grow LA's housing stock." I think, as our General Manager, Mercedes Marquez, quite eloquently put it, we do have a housing crisis, which also speakers on all sides of this issues have articulated, which is both about keeping tenants in affordable units and about us getting over our own NIMBYism in the city, of saying when we don't zone for additional density, we cram that density in, so we become overpopulated instead of building the buildings that can actually release that overpopulation and help investment to move forward in the city. With that last paragraph, I kind of made a list of the things that we're working on here. Mr. Reyes, as chair of Plum, Mr. Wesson as chair of our HCED committee, and a number of individuals are red tape reform measures that we've put forward to try to make building easier. We've done funding directly of affordable units as well as indirect funding with bond financing. In fact, this helps bond financing be easier for somebody who does want to invest with an 80-20 deal in their units. We've upzoned many neighborhoods, and I really appreciated what the speaker said about zoning. It's really been restrictive zoning that has gotten us into this crisis, and we need more supply in the city, though this does not retard that. A mixed use, adaptive reuse, small lot subdivision, an expedited plan check if you do environmental building, SB 1818 implementation, cleaning up of brownfields, the use of our CRA. We've done joint use housing with school district where we build housing where the school owns stuff, and the shared burden of the increases in costs for apartment owners through shared pass-throughs, as I mentioned before. So I think we're on the right track, and this is a small piece but a very important piece to close the loophole. Again, for people who sign an affidavit saying they're going to do one thing, then don't do it, and to move forward. So today I would ask for your support. I would ask us to close this loophole and to just as aggressively listen to the things that are being said by both renters and property owners right now. We have a very ambitious agenda we need to get through in terms of adding more housing to all neighborhoods, getting over our parochial NIMBYism, but at the same time recognizing that the most pro-business thing that we can do, and I appreciate many of the business groups we've worked with that have really articulated this, especially business owners who say our workforce can increasingly not come to work because they have to live so far away. This is not a debate, I will end on this again because it was brought up again today, on rent control. Both those folks who say rent control is what we need or rent control is not what we want. We have rent stabilization in the city, which is very different. This could have been written in a way that the new units would have to start at the same level, but to remind all of us, it goes up to market rents. It jumps up to market rents and then is stabilized moving forward. So this is not necessarily in option A, the most affordable of housing, but it is at least something that will stabilize the middle class. Option B gives property owners the ability to build affordable units as part of an expansion of their buildings. And those units usually will number less or fewer than the existing rent-stabilized units. We think that that helps use the market forces while protecting our renters. So I ask for your support in this today as amended in number 3, and I would move that forward. Thank you.
Is there a second to that?
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. And thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Our next speaker is Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. If I can ask the housing representatives to come to the table. We can still say good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Yolanda Chavez with the Housing Department.
Good morning, Helen Yoon with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office.
Good morning, Haka Mordezai, Housing Department.
One is I want to thank the staff for a quick turnaround, both the City Attorney's Office and the Housing Department and Planning, in how we were able to fold in the language for the mom and pop protection, understanding that there is hardship exemptions that we want to identify in this ordinance. But there was another question I had posed for the Director of Housing, Mercedes Marquez, and I wanted to understand if that was addressed in this ordinance or not. There's a concern that there would be a speculation as to, should I say, the speculators who would come to, let's say, a block, tie 4, 5, 6 lots together that might have a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, take those down and build a much larger, more massive structure without allowing for the full protection, if you will, of those who would have been displaced. Can you speak to that, and was that addressed in any way in the ordinance?
Yes, I think with the addition of the exemption for owner-occupied properties that are 4 or fewer units, I think that takes care of that. I think the the initial amendment, which exempted properties of 4 or fewer units, regardless of whether they were owner-occupied, were the problem. Because then you were could have been exempting investors that own 20 properties or 10 or 5.
So the fact that we added the language we did allowed us to curtail, if not eliminate, that possibility.
Exactly.
So I wanted to make sure that was stated on the record.
Yes.
I believe we're at a place where we're trying our best, given all the market constraints and or energy, to allow folks who live in the city of LA to live in the city while not penalizing those who would want to invest in the city. So we're trying to strike that balance.
Right.
It is a very difficult task because of the different political points of view as to what is the role of government or what isn't. But then again, I believe we need to have this process in place to protect those neighborhoods who have a certain character while trying to be opportunistic within that infrastructure in our communities that can stimulate these opportunities. I think the real challenge for all of us actually is, where are those locations? How do we stimulate these new investments, and how do we do it in a way in which we have a balanced approach? So with that would end my questions at this time. But I want to thank my colleagues for allowing us to create that priority for the mom and pops who would live in their unit and maintain their investment while allowing for access to affordable housing. And that, I think, is a goal we should all attain. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Our next speaker is Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Madam President. Could I ask the City Attorney and the Planning Department to come out?
James Blumenfeld, City Planning.
I was just going to ask, from the Planning Department's perspective, have you looked at the ordinance to see if your perceptions of whether how this may incentivize the construction of housing, or has that been evaluated at all by the Housing Department?
Yes, we looked at it. I think the issue that you're getting at is in the ability to replace units and requiring set-asides and various encumbrances, if you will, on the new units in conjunction with the density bonus law and other incentive-based laws that we're promulgating here. There's frequently a conflict between housing production, trying to maximize housing production, and having encumbrances on that production. So this is one of those ordinances. It's just a policy decision whether we're going to care more about production, or saving the affordable units, because there's a conflict, to some extent.
Okay, let me just ask, on page 2, paragraph 4, that deals with the issue of the density bonus, is that one of the issues you're referencing? It's right under subsection 3 on page 2, where we say currently that shall not be used to qualify.
Yes, right.
Could you hold my time? Is that one of the
Yes, because
disincentives?
yes, because what this incentive, this paragraph precludes counting the affordable units that would be produced in a density bonus project from counting, as I understand it, counting as the units that you'd be required to set aside for the exemption under the Ellis law, this ordinance.
And let me ask housing, and I don't have a clear understanding of this. Maybe you can explain it. My understanding is that there's two processes that a home or apartment owner can go through, either rent control or affordable housing. Now, at the outcome of either one, what would be is there a different handling of those two processes if they both chose to invoke Ellis and go out of the rental business and then rebuild? How are their two projects handled, and is it different?
I'm not clear on your question. I think what you're asking is, in the current ordinance before you, the draft ordinance, I'd say, the property owner has two options once they Ellis a property. If they rebuild as rental units, the number of units, RSO units that were demolished, have to be under the RSO if they re-rent within 5 years.
And that's where the 20% comes in.
Well, that's just the first option.
Okay.
The second option is they can set aside 20% of those units that they demolished and keep those as affordable up to 80% of AMI.
Okay.
So property owner has two options.
Okay. Go over that again, the two options. So all those.
So the first option is they Ellis, they demolish, they build rental within 5 years of demolition. The units that were demolished have to be under the RSO because they went back into the rental market within a 5-year period. Okay. First option. Second option is they Ellis, demolish, they rebuild rental, and set aside 20% of the demolished units in the new building as affordable up to 80% of AMI rental.
Let me ask the city attorney on one issue, and I think Ms. Reel mentioned this the other day, and I don't have the proper legal term, but she said there was a process that is available legally to where if we have a conflict in state law that you can go for, if not judicial review, some form of review that would save the city possibly attorney's fees if we use that as opposed to waiting to be sued. Is that an option that's available, or?
I don't believe so. Was this with respect to an affirmation action that you're referring to?
I can't remember the term, but she used a term that said there was a process that you could go through as it related to not going to ask for, it was either going to the state attorney general for an opinion or there was some other form of legal review that would allow the city to use without being put in a position to be impacted by legal fees if you were sued later. And so she gave that to us in a verbal conversation. I was wondering if she was going to do some more research to let us know if that was a viable option.
Well, she did do the research, and she determined that we actually would not be authorized to ask for an attorney general's opinion. And,
we would not as a city. It has to be, a state legislator?
That is correct.
Okay.
But the other thing with that is that if there is, let's say the ordinance passes and that there is some kind of litigation that is pursued, the AG's office will cancel that assignment because there is pending litigation.
Okay, so that deals with the state attorney general. Now, what about the other issue of judicial review or some form of review outside of a lawsuit?
She did mention that there was something called a validation action.
Okay.
And with respect to that, I can read her notes here. There is a government code section which authorizes cities to bring validation actions.
Who can bring it? States, you said?
Cities.
Cities, okay.
Probably public municipalities, to bring validation actions to determine the validity of bonds, warrants, contracts, and other indicia of indebtedness. This particular ordinance does not fall within one of those categories, and as a result, we are also precluded from going forward with that type of validation action.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask a couple other issues. Is that in looking at the whole issue of, and I think there's debate on both sides, what trumps what, Ellis versus Costa Hawkins, is our view from the city attorney is the only way to resolve that is to complete the ordinance, be sued, and let the judicial process work, or are there other means of resolving that apparent conflict?
At this point, it appears that being sued would be the only available option to determine that, because there are inconsistencies in both of those state statutes.
Okay. You know, one thing I'd like, colleagues, is that we have a motion circulating around to look at page 2, paragraph 4, and just to remove the word "not" out of it, which may eliminate some of that inconsistency versus density incentives versus what appears to be some impact as it relates to rent stabilization and rent control. And so it would eliminate, I think, some of the confusion as to the position of the city. And so hopefully we can move on that motion, which will clarify some. And I want to thank Mr. Reyes on his verbal motion last meeting that added to paragraph 2 on page 1 that does provide that owner exemption for 4 units. And so that's something that I think is another enhancement. The final thing I'd ask colleagues is we're dealing with number 20 also, was a motion that we had 3 items on that motion, and item 1 on it, as far as a request, has been dealt with by Mr. Reyes' verbal motion. I'd ask that number 20 go back to committee to wait for those reports back from the city, from the requested CAO report on what the impact is on potential property tax, and then also they ask for the CLA to do that research as to the state, if there is a similar ordinance in the state, and then also to just add one verbal addition to number 2 is ask the housing department to give us a report back on whether they view any other issues that deal with incentives of new construction. And so those are the 3 things. We just asked that report to go back. Planning. Housing and planning for the incentive issue, and then the CAO for the impact on property tax, and then finally the CLA looking at whether there's some similar statutes within the state of California. If we can do that as far as on 20, I appreciate it, and we can get that report back later.
Is there a second?
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
Which not?
Ms. Gruhl.
Madam President, was there a second on that motion?
Is there a second for Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam President. And this is an issue that I think we've had a good debate for many months when we've talked about Ellis Act issues, and particularly I think that the discussion and trying to deal with the mom and pops to deal with the issue of ensuring we create more affordable housing. As we discussed yesterday when we were considering our budget and the Housing Trust Fund, and we looked at how do we deal with a crisis, and it is about supply and demand. It is the need for us to create more supply, and when we fought for the Measure H on the November ballot, one of the things I talked about as chair of Transportation Committee was the fact that if we don't create affordable housing in our communities here in Los Angeles, people will be buying outside of our city or renting outside of our city and having to drive through, which we never get any of the benefits. We only get all the problems associated with that. Traffic, environmental issues, and the fact that the people are driving through our neighborhoods and our communities. And so I think that as we looked at this issue, and I think Mr. Rosendahl and myself have the most impacted area of where we are seeing, particularly have seen, buildings being torn down, not the condo conversion of an existing apartment building going to condo, but the tearing down of units. And in some areas, again, it's a dilapidated building that has been there and there's some improvement that occurs, but what we're finding, particularly in Studio City, is the lack of affordable housing, that no one really can afford to live there. Additionally, because of the market, we had a lot of buildings that were torn down They said they're going out of business. This is not mom and pops. These are people who have sold their buildings. They have sold to interested developer, which again, all developers are not bad. They're not saying that. But what is happening is we now have a number of condos, now apartments, that have been built that are within that 5-year period of time, and people who have been moved out of that neighborhood and now are re-renting. And this was a concern that we had, and the city attorney came to us in housing and said that there was a loophole within that. I think that this compromise really deals with all of the interests that have been discussed. And Mr. Parks has been pushing for a review of RSO to look at all the issues surrounding, which is appropriate in the city of Los Angeles. It's appropriate to take a look back and say, how do we make this better? How do we address the issues that have been raised by both tenants and owners of those apartment buildings? I think that, as I mentioned, it protects the mom and pop owners by allowing them to sell their properties that are not artificially depressed by a more restrictive ordinance. However, it does not encourage the kind of speculation that has fueled that recent rash that I have seen in my district, many of which are sitting vacant. And when you have a tenant who comes to you and says, I was evicted because they told me they were getting out of the apartment business and the Ellis Act, which they have by right, and to see in some instances less than a year later that in fact they're being rented, and that it has changed. And so I think that we need to be able to balance that. That's what we do every day as elected officials, to try to balance the interests of both our tenants and our owners. And so I stand today in support of the compromise and number 3 that Mr. Garcetti and Mr. Reyes have worked very hard on as well. I think it gives our owners options. There's hardship exemptions. There's all kinds of ways in which we can deal with some of the challenges that have been raised on both sides. What we don't like to see in the city of Los Angeles, and sorry, I know I'm over, is something that is so restricted that allows no kind of response for us to be able to deal with individual instances. And I think what has been drafted on option A, option B, and hardship exemption gives us the opportunity to deal fairly with the tenants and the owners of the property. And so I stand in support of item number 3 and the motion that I seconded with Mr. Garcetti. Thank you, Ms.
Gruhl.
And a lot of the questions I was going to ask were at this. I didn't just make a statement. Was Mr. Parks asked for some explanation so everyone understood the different parts of it. Thank you, Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much. For the first time, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Madam President. I really want to commend Councilmember Garcetti, Reyes, Bernard Parks for really taking this, what was a major loophole in our current ordinance, and closing it in a way that I think has addressed a lot of the concerns. I actually think this is a great step for the city of Los Angeles. And I think it's a great victory for tenants who are living in affordable housing units in the city of Los Angeles. And while we listen to all the concerns, I mean, for me, the facts really speak very loud about why we need to do this. I mean, we are losing more affordable housing units in this city than we're able to, obviously, to build. In 2005, we were able to construct 1,000 units of affordable housing, but we lost 118 units. In 2006, we built 1,263 units of affordable housing, but 2,068 were demolished. And someone gave me the example of the rainforest. I mean, once the rainforest is gone, it's gone. We will never be able to have that resource again. And that's the way it is with affordable housing units. Once they're gone, they're gone. And we were losing ground in terms of providing that for our residents of Los Angeles. So I think this is a great opportunity. This is a great way to close this loophole. And this measure won't stop new development. I think it'll just make it so that it won't be the only option or the first choice of a developer in a way to make a profit. I think they'll think of something else to do because that we've closed this loophole, and I appreciate that, and I think that's important for all of the residents of Los Angeles. I am proud of us as a city council for stepping up to the plate, again, and taking an issue which is problematic in the city of Los Angeles and doing something that I think is fair, it's reasonable, and it should be a huge relief to many people who are looking to us, looking to government to intervene when when the market-based approach doesn't work. They look to government to come in and step in and make sure that residents who live in Los Angeles have a future and can have places that they can afford to live. So thanks to all of you for crafting this. I think it's an important step for the city of Los Angeles today.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. For the first time, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President. I know we're tinkering around a little bit here, but let me understand the fraud issue. How are we going to resolve that? People who pretend that they have a relative or this or that and really aren't the ma and pa.
I think what the ordinance would do is they'd have to prove that they're actually the owner of the property and that it has been owner occupied. And we know all of the RSO units, we know which units are owner occupied because they're exempted from the rent fee. Mm-hmm. So we already know that. So with this additional provision, they would have to prove that they are the owner, that they've owned the property for 3 years, and that they've lived there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. So that gives us the comfort we need that they're not just kicking people out like they have been doing in the past.
Well, that's a different issue. That's still a very, very challenging issue when a property owner says, I'm going to evict someone because I'm moving in a family member. It's still very challenging for us to be able to enforce that, unless we're going to doors and asking for proof of the family relation.
Mm-hmm. Right now as I'm sitting here, I have 2 projects where the tenants are being thrown out and it's being converted to condos. I have it all the time in my district, more than any other district in the city. What can we do about that?
I would probably ask the council for direction as the policymakers. I think the ordinance on condo conversions that we went through recently has done a lot to be able to deal with those issues. We're working on additional provisions with the city attorney to ensure that if people are going to convert, to ensure that there's a way that people are paid the relocation, so that it would make people really think about it, think about whether they're ready to convert, and be able to put some money into an escrow account on relocation fees. So we're still working on some provisions that will strengthen those types of ordinances if you approve them.
Because the dilemma I have in the 11th district, 50% of my constituents are renters. Every day they're being thrown out of the district. They cannot find a place to live in the 11th district. And this relocation, be it 10 grand, it's still a pittance. It doesn't solve the issue. When you wrestle with this, what advice do you give us in dealing with that challenge?
Help us increase the supply of affordable housing.
That's what Prop H happened, and of course you need a 2/3 vote. It should have been a 55% vote. It's ridiculous. And so by 2 points, we lost $1 billion opportunity to create more housing.
When I can tell you that we're working on several initiatives to help us leverage our money and to help us increase the supply of both rental and for sale housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we'll come back to this issue later, but I'm obviously supporting where we're going with this. Anything that gives tenants protection or gives them rights or gives them more money rather than the present situation, obviously I believe in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Our next speaker for the first time is Mr. Zine.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. You mentioned affordable housing. I don't think there's many places in the city of Los Angeles that we have affordable housing, which is a very sad situation. When you talk about affordable housing, building more units, where do we connect the infrastructure for that affordable housing? Where do we connect the roads that are already congested? Where do we connect the parks, the educational system, the hospitals? Where do we connect that with the affordable housing? Or is it just on an island by itself to pack people in a concentrated area where you have no quality of life, over-concentration, and you don't have the other components. Do we have a link up to say we're going to build affordable housing and we're going to have those other components so you have some quality of life versus people like a sardine in a can where you keep packing more in and not having the other aspects of any activity of quality of life? Are there any other components that are considered when we're talking about affordable housing or housing in general?
I think the housing department and the planning department, we work on this all the time, and what we really focus on is smart growth, because you're right, it's not about packing people in, but increasing density where it makes sense, where there's the infrastructure to handle that density, near transportation, etc. So we do think about all of those issues. It's not just about increasing the supply without thinking about where it should go and where it makes sense.
We're thinking, but are we actually putting something into place other than thinking about it? I represent the San Fernando Valley, the 101 freeway, the 405 freeway. The commute is now before 5 o'clock. Soon people aren't going to go home anymore. They're just going to stay at work and go home on the weekends at midnight because of the traffic. We had a meeting last night in the Valley. It took over 2 hours to get there because there was an incident on the freeway. Without an incident, it takes over an hour. But we think about it, but what are we doing actually to bring other components together? Because I feel for these motorists, and somehow people think that elected officials have helicopters and we get to skirt over everything. We're fighting traffic and we're as frustrated as everyone else. How do we put those other components, other than thinking about it, put something into play?
We're actually working on it, and I'll have Jane respond, because the first step is revising all the community plans, and I think the planning department is very busy doing that.
I think if you step back or up maybe more at the 30,000-foot level, one of the things we have to do, because in the city the population is growing, and the population is growing because we're having kids, not
well, I'm done having mine.
Okay, so you're doing your part.
Thank you.
But because that's occurring, and people are going to be here, more people are going to be here, and those kids that we have are going to become 16, they're going to drive cars. From the planning department's point of view, what we're trying to do is accommodate that growth in the smartest way possible. Recognizing that people are coming and going to drive cars, what we can do is focus the growth where we've invested in the transit. And we're doing, as Yolanda said, one of the really important things that you've all funded in the budget, and I imagine you did that because you saw the value of this, is to revise those community plans so that the infrastructure, not just the roads, but the other infrastructure, but particularly the roads, are linked to the decisions about where and how much there is growth, so that the new population, the kids we have that grow up, can at least have options. I don't think anybody believes that in Los Angeles in the next few years people are going to abandon their cars because there's more subway stops. But we do think that as we can see from particularly North Hollywood, and downtown, that as people are becoming more used to riding light rail on the subway, they're seeing it as an asset, and they're moving to these places. These station stops are actually becoming real estate assets that people are marketing, and more people are living there. I think there is around 1,000 units coming online at the Hollywood and Vine station. That's a lot of people who will at least have the option to take some of those trips we see on the streets on transit. People will be able to go there, and people will be able to go from there to other places. So again, I don't think that means those 1,000 people are going to have no cars, but of the statistical 8 trips a day we all make, some of them, in those 1,000 people, won't be in cars. And that's where we have to go, and it's a culture change in Los Angeles. It's not, Manhattan people have not been used to these lifestyles, but you can see the marketing materials for the downtown, how they're positioning their buildings with regard to the transit. And that's where we have to do. And as for what we are doing actually, in addition to...
Excuse me, madam. We seem to have gotten far afield from the incorporating the Ellis Act provisions into this.
I don't really know if she has. I think it's responsive to the question. We're talking about affordable housing. We're talking about this particular component. When we talk about a place for people to live and how the question is the components linked together. I don't want to cut you off. I understand where you're going with it, but if we look at our forefathers that came here before us, they decided the San Fernando Valley, the farmland, should be occupied with single-family residents, which they've done. And now that's so saturated. So now we're out of space. The other component I have is senior housing. We know there's an aging population. You look around this room, especially the front row, we got some seniors there. Do we have a component for senior housing on fixed incomes, Social Security, the pension plans that have evaporated? Are we including them? Because if you're looking at $2,000 a month for rent, which is not uncommon in certain areas of the city, people can't afford that on Social Security. Seniors can't afford it. Are we including the component where we have the senior housing population also, in addition to changing the lifestyle, where you're going to live close to work, hopefully use the subway, use the public transit? Because, you know, we were brought up, Angelinos, 16, you want a car, you want your freedom. That's how we were brought up, not like New York or other parts of the country. So that's a mental change, obviously. What about the senior component, if there is one?
Tell you that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund actively finances the development of senior housing. But just to clarify, RSO units are not necessarily affordable. When we talk about affordable, we really are talking about a rent based on someone's income. Okay, and so you keep in mind that every time someone leaves a unit that is under the RSO, moves out, that landlord brings that rent up to market. So when we talk about RSO, they may not be affordable to the folks living in them.
And if you look at the west side, where it's popular to live on the west side, and the rents are much higher, and there's a vacancy and it goes higher, we keep building, and we keep on talking about affordability, but the way that the rules are, it starts out at this level, whatever the market rate is after these buildings are built, and then a few years later someone leaves, then it's going to be, $1,500 more, or $3,000, or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's condos downtown selling for $1 million in downtown Los Angeles, which is out of the range of most people. Yet there are some individuals who are purchasing it. So when we talk about this, we talk about these ceilings and these floors when it comes to the ability to afford and still to put food on the table and clothes and maybe support a family. It seems we're short-sighted with it because it's the initial concept, whatever the market rate is, and then that market rate's going to keep going higher. At least that's what that past history is showing us. How do we balance that for the workers, the people who are clerks, the people who are waiters and waitresses, and the labor force that we have?
Mr. Zine, after your next response,
This will be my last question.
press your button again
Thank
if you
you.
want to keep talking.
If you respond to that,
Well,
please.
the only way to ensure affordability is by adding affordability restrictions to projects. And one way we do it is when we provide public financing. If we're able to provide public financing, we're able to restrict the rents to a certain income level. Under RSO units, that's not the case. These are privately owned. They did not have public financing when they were developed, so they're not restricted on income levels.
Market rate.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Mr. Garcetti.
Mr. Reyes. I'll conclude.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. In reading the 3A, the motion introduced by Councilman Parks, and thank you, Councilman Parks, I'm glad we can get to this point, but I did want some clarity as to what this implementation means and how do we look at the interpretation of how this will be applied. My understanding that under SB 1818 that there's already a set of land use incentives that are granted, and it just sounds to me like we're double dipping. But before I make that conclusion, can you explain what that means? Please hold my time.
Yes, and with all due respect to my esteemed colleague from planning, because I love Jane and we work together all the time, I have to disagree with her in that it conflicts with the density bonus law, because the paragraph, the last paragraph in section B on page 2, what it basically does is prevent developers from double counting. Because when a developer gets a density bonus through SB 1818 and they set aside affordable units, they have received several land use concessions, increased floor area, parking, height, all types of concessions. So they're providing those set-asides because the city is providing these land use concessions. So they're already getting something for the set-asides.
So there's a benefit.
Right. They're already getting a benefit for those units. So if if Councilman Park's motion would actually provide a loophole, really, in this ordinance, because now, if I'm a developer and I get a density bonus units and all the incentives that come with that, I could also use it to count my requirement under this section of the ordinance, so that I'm using the incentives that I got under SB 1818 to get out completely of the RSO forever and not to have to set aside additional affordable.
Okay. So we end up losing net affordable units, given the crisis we're in.
Exactly.
We're making it harder for the middle class and the working folks to even take advantage of these units.
Exactly.
Because of the land use incentives that benefit the investor while not having to require affordable units.
Exactly.
Okay, colleagues, I'm hoping that those of us who are interested in creating housing for people who live in Los Angeles understand these dynamics. Evidently, we have two different opinions on how this impact would be. Unless, Jane, you can correct.
Yeah, I didn't mean that it conflicts with the law. What I was suggesting was if you're trying to incentivize housing production, having one an increased set aside is sort of a disincentive. I don't believe it conflicts with the law itself.
I'm sorry?
I said that counting the density bonus units in a density bonus project where you have taken down rent-controlled units, it doesn't conflict with the law. It just is an additional disincentive for housing production. So the goals are different. That's all.
But then how do you look at the land use incentives? So you're saying you want to pile on the land use incentives along with dismissing the requirement for affordable units? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
I'm simply saying that when you when you disallow the density bonus units to count as the units that you're required to replace under the RSO ordinance, it's a further difficulty, I don't know what word to use, to building the new housing. It's more difficult.
But that's
all I was saying.
That's a personal opinion.
Well, it's actually not, and I have to disagree with that because it's not more difficult, because the 20% set aside is just an option. So if someone gets the density bonus through SB 1818, they set aside those units, they decide that instead of doing the additional up to 20% set aside under this RSO requirement, that instead they'll keep the 5 or 6 units they demolish, whatever, under the RSOs, and they could rent those at market. So that is not a disincentive.
Okay.
Instead, we're providing we're really providing we're giving them all these great incentives under SB 1818, and then allowing them to get out of the RSO completely and not meet the additional affordability requirement. So this is not a disincentive at all on development.
So for the majority of the people in Los Angeles, we would be hurting them because we're making it harder for them to have a roof over their heads.
Well, I think it really is just a loophole, and you're allowing developers to double count. I think last week, Councilman Rosenthal asked a question about the Mello Act. Same situation. The Mello Act is an inclusionary requirement. It's inclusionary law. You have to provide affordable units. So with this, what Councilman Park's motion would do is allow them to count those units that they have to build as affordable as a state requirement to count against this requirement, instead of either building additional or keeping those under the RSO.
Okay.
So I was only suggesting you'd have to double it. If you count them both separately, it's double. It's either double or it's half. That's all. So it either is or isn't.
But they don't have to do that, right? It's an option.
It's an option. Okay. Then I would respectfully suggest we don't create more loopholes, but try to hold folks accountable and understand that in the process you make a choice. Either you take advantage of the SB 1818 but understand to separate the two would be a healthier way to move forward from a policy point of view. And before I end, there's item 3B, and Councilman Rosenthal touched on this for a second. It's enforcement. We understand that personnel will be needed. We need to be able to enforce it. Otherwise, these are just empty words. That's words in a book that can't be enforced. So item 3B attempts to add additional staff for the enforcement of what we're trying to do today. Otherwise, the breaking point for those folks who are already on edge and those who are trying to advocate are also will exacerbate that situation if we don't have the capacity to enforce. So I'd always also ask for a yes vote on 3B. And on 3A, I would just want to suggest that we close that loophole and not double dip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Our next speaker will be Mr. Garcetti, followed by Mr. Parks for the second time.
Thank you, Madam President. A few things on this. One, I believe that we had one misstatement in terms of the mechanism under option A, and it was a mistake that I made as well last time. If you have an 8-unit building and you go to 20, all 20 are rent stabilized, not just 8 replacement units. So I want to state that very clearly on the record. But it jumps up to market rate. Again, we had the option of whether it would stay at the previous rental level or go up to market rate, and that was the compromise that was arrived at. But it's not just to replace those, it's to make sure that what's built in the physical locale of that place stays rent stabilized, not rent controlled. Secondly, I would like to add, there's been one concern on page 3 on the owner occupancy exemption. This is not a content change at all, colleagues, but to make clear, the sentence that begins, if the building has not yet been demolished, an owner may file an application for exemption from the RSO. There is a concern that some folks may file an application here and not actually demolish. So if we could add a sentence somewhere along these lines, and maybe the city attorney can help clean this up, the previous sentence would apply to owners only using the Ellis Act to demolish units. I know that's what the meaning is, but some folks thought that that might be a loophole that people could say that they're applying and then get out of RSO and then never do it. Okay? Does that make sense? And then on the motion, on Mr. Parks' motion that's before us, now there are 3 bites at this, and I agree with Mr. Reyes in terms of the opinion that you expressed, Ms. Bloomfeld, that there's, if we believe that 1818 is a net wash, then that should be a neutral. So when you said an additional disincentive, I don't believe, and I don't think anybody in good conscience around here believes 1818 is a disincentive. Hopefully we've done that in the right way. Saying it's an additional disincentive was a debate that we've already had around here in the previous week, and I think you were here, but you may have missed it. But we said very clearly that we've designed this in a way to incentivize. If you take an 8-unit building and you're going up to 20 units, in option B you only have to build 4 affordable units. To me, that is a market incentive. You're actually going down. You're going down to 4. You're going down to 4. That's option B. If you haven't read it, option B is different than option A. So I think we already have consensus here. We don't need to have this argument with staff, but I just also took some umbrage with that as well. In terms of what you're trying to intend here, Mr. Parks, though, this is the last piece. We have a number of options where people can go right now. 1818, if people take that, density bonuses to property owners, that was designed at the state level, and we've implemented local ordinances to try to assist people to, if they want to go to higher density, they give us some affordable units in exchange. It's wants to give more profit. Hopefully the developer at the same time is getting a social good of more affordable units. That's one. 2 is the closing of this loophole, so that we say people can absolutely build up and do that as long as there's a replacement either of rent-stabilized building with a rent-stabilized building, or 20% affordable units, and the rest can go market rate. And everything goes up to the market price, just to be clear there. Now, in an ideal world, whether we call it double dipping for the developer or double dipping for the city, in an ideal world we get as many units and keep the market forces going. But I think there's a disagreement about what actually would play out. My worry, on one hand, would be if we said, okay, put both on, is that you'd have some folks who would say in the marketplace, well, I don't have to do 1818, so I'll just do the basic. But if we've done 1818 the right way, it should be a wash. It should be neutral. But on the other hand, if we have done it the wrong way, we may actually wind up disincentivizing as many net units. So maybe a compromise to amendment to the amendment would make sure that we didn't, as a result of your motion, Mr. Parks, have overall a lower number of replacement affordable housing units than would have been done just by the ordinance itself. I don't know if that makes sense, Mr. Reyes, but so in other words, and your language may reflect that already because it says may qualify, but I don't want that to qualify. Let's say if it was the option to go 1818 or there was an inclusionary zoning requirement as in some parts of the city, and let's say under our ordinance you had to do 4 units, and then though 1818 you only got 2 bonus units. I wouldn't want us to net loss 2, but as long as those would qualify as 2 of them, and that owner would still need to do at least 2 more to get the minimum, I think that may be a compromise that we'd have together. Is that okay? So if that's what the intent was, then we may have addressed that, and at least we'll know that we're not going to net below what the ordinance would have called for. Okay? So with that, I hope that is resolved at the 11th hour. And Mr. Parks, I guess it's up to you to conclude.
Mr. Parks is our next speaker.
Thank you. No, the intent was never to reduce the number. It was a matter of giving an incentive for people that wanted to build more and not to eliminate a hard-fought density bonus that we put in place and not allow them to use it. And I think the other thing that Mr. Reyes commented about people that may tie lots together and such, I think we have more than adequate planning mechanisms that you have to get approval and variances to allow those things to not occur or to limit their ability. So I think we've gotten those things in place. But my biggest concern is that we can't put all of our energy in just protecting the 700,000 units in restabilization. If somebody doesn't start building more units, the next generation of council people will be talking about the 700 units that are deteriorating before our eyes, and we don't have the ability to then have adequate housing for anyone. So we have to do it on a balance of saying, let's do some protection, but let's do some incentivizing so that we end up with a glut of housing, which is the only thing that's going to drive down the housing market, not protecting and allowing the rents to continue going up, and then people come in and say, I can't find a place, or 800 moves to 1,600. The only way this is going to be resolved is one day we're going to have a situation that there's more units than people, and then the developers and the apartment owners and the landlords will adjust their prices accordingly. So the issue for 3A, with 3A was merely to not ignore the previously approved density bonuses, but to allow people to see that there is that balance, but never to go into the actual ordinance and then reduce that number from that point. So that was not the intent. The other issue, I'm glad we clarified the one issue that Mr. Garcetti brought up, because on the issue that there are some ability is moving forward, that some new construction, depending on how the landlord or the owner moves forward, could all be under that label of affordable. In some instances, it could be 20%. So I think people need to know those options beforehand. Again, after all this good work that we do, we still have the issue of whether litigation starts and all those other things, which we have to then move forward on that regard. And I appreciate the amendments, I think, help me vote for it in the sense of moving it forward. Again, as always, you don't agree with all of it, but certainly it's enough to move forward. But at least gives us an ordinance to where the developers, the landlords, everybody will see in print what actually is the law in the city of Los Angeles. Then there is as much clarity as we can provide. And so that's something I think we've done today, and it's been how many months?
2002.
2002. Herb Weston didn't have a gray hair when he came here. Now he has a couple. But no, I appreciate all that work, but I think we've done what public policy does. We've gotten to the point that where everybody's got their point of view. We've solved many of the issues. Not everybody's going to be happy, but at least there's an ordinance that clarifies where we are. I would just like to ask those from the developer and landlord community to stand up. Appreciate your presence here, because without you, we would not get that other point of view. And one of the things that we try to do for this group is also the 4-year battle of getting rent stabilization study so that we'll get a objective view of what we're doing, because it's been 2 decades since that has been in place. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. And again, Mr. Zine, and then Mr. Reyes.
I'm going to pass to Mr. Reyes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Stein. And again, I strongly believe that we don't want to lose no new net affordable units. So I want to be very clear, does this ordinance guarantee that? Can someone answer at the table? Madam Attorney? Housing Department? Someone answer?
Yes,
It does, I think.
Please hold my time.
what it does is it closes a loophole. So we should be clear on what the ordinance does.
Okay.
It closes a loophole so that property owners are not demolishing, ellising their buildings, demolishing, rebuilding as rental to get out of the RSO.
Okay, but in my concern with the actual amendment, Councilman Garcetti
the net
referred
loss?
to
There's no net loss.
the no new net. I mean, I want to make sure that what he was saying is actually going to be realized in the language.
I would rather have the land use attorneys respond to that because I'm actually not clear whether there wouldn't be.
Because I understand the spirit and the acknowledgement and the purpose that Councilman Garcetti stated. I saw a lot of nods, but I didn't hear or see change in language that reaffirms that.
Okay, I'm not clear.
Please hold my time.
For the record, Sharon Cedar of Cardenas, City Attorney's Office. I've taken a look at the proposed amending language, and there's 2 different levels. Under density bonus law, it's 5% or 10% or various other levels depending on what you're doing. Under the proposed Ellis Act amendments, it's 20%. So even if you counted those units, they would still have to add additional units to the density bonus or the Mellow Act requirement in order to get to the 20%.
So you said should. I'm very particular about how we use our verbs. Is it will or should? Must?
Must. No, it will, because you're saying, all you're saying is that they can use these units that are created under different programs to count towards the 20%. Right.
Okay.
But you're still going to get, under the RSO amendments, you're still going to get 20% of affordable units in order for them to be out of the rent levels.
Okay, so thank you. I want to make sure that was stated for the record. Again, the beauty of creative tension is that it allows us to respond in a manner in which we try to do the best for everyone. So, can I say this? For the sake of balance, I'd like to ask those who came on the tenant side to stand up and demonstrate that both developers and tenants, you can't have one without the other. You can't have your resources and your profit margins without the tenants. But if you don't have the tenants, again, it's a relationship we need to stimulate. My issue here is, on a case-by-case basis, when I have families and children telling me they have to live in their car because they can't afford to live in the city anymore, is a real issue. And when I look at property owners who don't live in the city, out of the kindness of their heart, work within the law, and say, I must make my profit margin, I understand that. But we need to have a city that can be healthy, that can be business friendly, and that can house the employees of those who have the means to invest in property. So for me, I see us trying to achieve that goal and that balance, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes, and thank you for everybody for their long, hard work on this. I think we are there, as item 3A has been clarified to mean no net loss there of units. I think that is accepted as friendly amendment if nobody objects. I added one sentence as well on further clarification for the units that there is an application moving forward to. If there's no objection to that, that will be accepted as friendly. So we have, again, I moved 3 before, and that was seconded by Mr. Reyes, and in the same motion asked to receive and file 2 and 20. So if there's no objection.
Mr. President, there actually was a motion by Mr. Parks to send 20 back to the Housing Committee.
Okay.
It's an additional request to have Housing and Planning report back on incentives for construction.
Okay. There's no problem with that. Yes.
3B, I want to make sure that was moved.
Yes, and 3B moved as well. That was accepted already as friendly, so. With 20 going back with the ask from Mr. Parks, that is the package before us. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
That is approved. Thank you very much.
Mr. Clerk, next item.
Item 15 was called special by Councilmember Smith.
Mr. Smith, item number 15. And if we could, I know everyone has been here a long time, but if you could leave quietly, so we can go on with our meeting. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam President. Number 15 is the result of a motion which I introduced regarding the upkeep of those sidewalks and side areas.
Hold on one second. Sorry, Mr. Smith. Guards, if you could encourage everyone to leave quietly. Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Was an ordinance that we brought forward through Public Works to establish a policy and a procedure for taking care of sidewalk areas, those public areas, side areas to homes that face public streets, that have walls, that don't have lawns, to make sure that our streets are maintained in a proper way according to the law, which is that the property owner is responsible for maintaining that, which has always been the law, but there's been no procedure to make sure that they do that. And so this ordinance is an ordinance brought forward to establish a procedure that would allow our street inspectors to go forward and give notice that people need to clean up their properties, and if they do not, then a procedure that they could be fined or brought in, as we do with parking enforcement and other things, into a hearing process. And so I think there's been a question that Mr. Alarcon brought forward that I agree to, that we need to have addressed. If the staff could come forward on this. Is there a staff here on this item? Gary? The question revolves around, Gary, the fact that if a person is noticed, they clean up the property, 6 months later it falls into a state of disrepair or problem again, how do we treat that? Is that a continuing citation, or will the clock start over again?
Hey, good morning, Gary Harris, Bureau of Street Services. That would be treated as a new incident. Each violation, when we gain compliance, if we went out the first time, we gave a warning, which is our first step, we gain compliance. Then 6 months later, we get a new violation. We start from square one again with a warning, and then we move progressively through the graduated steps in the ordinance to gain compliance.
Okay. And then secondly, on the same issue, there was concern that some people weren't sure about the language here, that the first time is not a citation but a notice, that you don't go out and fine people on the first knock on the door.
That is correct. We are creating a brochure regarding property owner responsibility. So our first attempt would be to give that brochure with a compliance date, a warning, advising the property owner of their responsibilities and exactly what it is we want them to do. If at that point they fail to comply, then we would move to the next step, which would be to issue that first citation with an administrative monetary penalty.
Very good. I think that answers the questions that most people had. I'll let anyone ask questions that has it. But I think this is a response to the fact that we've had a law in the book for a long time without the ability to enforce the law, and this gives our street use inspectors the ability to enforce the law without first finding people. I once told somebody that my daughter moved to Anaheim a number of years ago, bought a house that they were going to build as a fix-upper, and began working on the house, but let the lawn go to weed. And an inspector knocked on the door and gave her a $50 ticket right on the site. I didn't want to be that extreme, but I did want a process that would at least allow you to represent the city's laws, and that was we want people to maintain their properties in a proper order, which doesn't diminish the look and feel of a neighborhood. And I think that's important, and that's what this ordinance is designed to do. So thank you very much. And before I get off, I have another few seconds left. I just want to congratulate Gary. In case you don't know, Gary Harris from the Bureau of Street Services was elected state president of the Inspectors Association. So congratulations, Gary, for your election.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Zine, followed by Mr. Labange.
Just a brief follow-up on that. The enforcement authority that the department has, that your investigators have, they can warn and warn and warn and warn and then cite? Or is it warn and cite, a philosophy that they have to get compliance? Can you explain that?
In this particular, with this violation, first of all, we view each type of violation differently. Flagrant violations like illegal dumping, we don't have a warning philosophy. For illegal dumping, we immediately use the legal remedies at our disposal, which are criminal prosecution for the misdemeanor violation of law. We consider this violation a more minor type of violation, and so in this instance, we use warning as our first step, and we attempt to gain compliance on these minor violations prior to using that criminal remedy if necessary.
So each situation, they have the discretion, start with something and then end up with something else. If it's a flagrant, then they can go right for the arrest.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Sheriff, thank you. Use this tool effectively and safely. I was walking this morning on a street, a boulevard in Los Angeles, and there was a lot of juniper plants that were kind of high, which is really a violation of the law, because there should be nothing between the sidewalk and the curb, right?
Right.
So, and I don't want to be hostile towards anybody, and I understand their interest, but there was debris that gathered there and a hazard and things of this nature here for the visibility triangle at the intersection where you'd come to. So I just want to encourage you to do your job. How many inspectors do we have in the city?
Right now we have 45.
45 members. We should have more than 45 because this is part of the quality of life component that we all would want. So I hope as we build through a linear public works support for public works inspectors. How many of you guys work in a task force mode where you may put the task force, where you let's say loan the Hollywood inspector to the Wilshire inspector and get together with the Southwest LA inspector and 3 inspectors go through a region and try to have more of an effective push?
We have a regular task force of about 21 people, which
Good.
is almost half of our staff that we put together to attack major issues.
Good. Well, Mr. Harris, thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for your leadership on this, Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Yeah, well, we thank you, Mr. Labange, for your leadership on it, too, and Mr. Smith. And as Chair of Public Works, obviously, we discussed this a couple of days ago. Again, take a deep breath and tell a person out there watching this who has a potential problem what the steps are we're going to do. And what would you define as out of compliance or an issue?
Well, first of all, our main goal is compliance. So the first thing we're going to do is go out, talk to the individual. We're going to give them the information on what it is that they need to do to comply.
Okay.
And also,
what do they do to be out of compliance? What are some of the things you see that are wrong?
Well, we have a very particular problem in alleys, especially with overgrown vegetation. We have trees, as Councilmember Labange mentioned, that create problems for us with the visibility triangle from the overgrowth at near corners and intersections throughout the city. Also, we have shrubbery bushes in the parkway that get so overgrown that vehicles have a problem parking in the area.
Fair enough,
People
but how
can't
does
get
the
out.
homeowner become responsible when he thinks it's public land and it's not his anyhow? I mean,
So that's the importance of our education campaign, by first going out, advising them, giving the brochure and the information to make sure that we do our part to make them aware that it is their responsibility before we resort to any enforcement action.
Okay, so inspectors will be traveling around the city, and they will see a situation that they consider out of compliance. They will then get a hold of that homeowner.
Correct. We get it by two ways, either by proactively, by our going out and looking at it, or through complaints that are brought to us through our complaint system.
Mm-hmm. So it's overgrown this, overgrown that. What other issues usually do you look for?
With relation to this particular ordinance, we'll be looking for any maintenance issues, rubbish, debris, bulky items, things that don't belong on the public right-of-way, and advising the residents about that issue.
Mm-hmm. What if they didn't put the stuff there or have anything to do with it? They say, we don't know about that.
If they tell us it's illegal dumping, then we view it as illegal dumping and we handle it the way we do now. We will assign that to our team that does surveillance, looking at the area to try to apprehend those involved in illegal dumping. The city will be responsible for cleaning it up if it is indeed illegal dumping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you give them the notice, and if they don't comply, what's the fine?
If they fail to comply after a reasonable amount of time for them to clean it up, the initial fine would be $50.
Mm-hmm. And what if they don't pay the $50?
If they didn't pay the $50, it would be a collection issue. Since it is an administrative fine, we'd have to assign that to a collection agency for processing.
Mm-hmm. So with the warning stage, you'll give them a piece of paper or a brochure or some kind of information that says you're out of compliance because of A, B, C, or D, or something like that.
Correct. And depending on the severity of what it is they need to do to clean is the compliance period. We won't give you 3 days to do a major cleanup job, so we will use discretion and be reasonable in the amount of time given for the compliance.
And in that reasonableness, is there a phone number they can call and talk to somebody?
Well, we always encourage them to use the 311 number when they have questions, but if they want to call us directly, they can call us at 847-6000, and I'll be happy to talk to them.
Will that be on the notice or something like that? Because sometimes people don't know, and they see this notice, oh my God, this is something I need to do.
It will be clearly on the notice along with 311.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to ask Mr. Smith, and appreciate you doing this motion. One of the things that we've been looking at, and this is a side issue on this same thing, is that we have this information all the time about lighting assessment districts. Yet it appears that there's enough authority to have a sidewalk assessment, but because lighting does a separate thing versus the street repair, whether we have the ability to look at those jointly so that we could have a funding source in the future that deals with not only lighting but street or sidewalk repair, sidewalk maintenance as a dedicated fund from an assessment district. And that seems to be, from what we heard in one of our committees, that you can do that. It's just that the two departments work separately and independently, and whether we can pull those two things together and begin to look at assessment districts for both issues, being that they are basically an issue for the communities to deal with two important issues. And I was just wondering if during the discussion on this, whether any of those issues were ever addressed or discussed.
There was a discussion at one point in Mr. Rosenthal's committee on the assessment concept. Just a brief discussion about it. This doesn't address that. This is merely cleanup. But that is something I think, and we've had some discussions in his committee about sidewalks and how we deal with it, and that was briefly discussed. We can have that further discussion. But
I just asked for Mr. Rosenthal as the chair there that we could begin to look at that, because we see all these lighting assessments and issues that deal with the issues in communities. But again, if we can look at that kind of assessment for sidewalks and for maintenance, repair, and cleanliness, there would be some form of a dedicated source of revenue for us to deal with not only the issue that is in this motion, but looking at other issues of repairing those sidewalks that will take us what they claim is about 83 years. And so I would just ask, as a side note from this item, if we could ask you and your committee to look at that whole issue of pulling those two groups, the lighting and the sidewalk people, together and look at assessments more broadly.
Mr. Parks, you're on the same wavelength as we are as a committee. You might not know this, but every time Bill Robertson gets up and says it'll be 83 years or 86 years before we do all of our sidewalks because we don't have the funds, we never invested in our infrastructure, we have a strategy. USC students did an analysis of what we call point of sale. It's going to be coming to the full council for consideration. This was a discussion that Mr. Smith had over the years on it, and now we have found a strategy where we intend to incorporate the concept of point of sale. Basically what that means is if your sidewalk is out of compliance on any level, you must, as part of the point of sale of selling that property, deal with that issue. And we're in the process of getting the realtors and getting everybody engaged in this to make it happen. If we can do that, and we, the policymakers, make this kind of a law, we can actually clean up our sidewalk issue, some feel, within 10 to 15 years. Totally clean it up. Because every time a person sells the property, that opportunity to look at it, if it needs to be done, gets looked at, and if it needs to be repaired, gets done. But we'll have a good discussion on that later.
That's an option, and that we look at 50-50, we look at what the city repairs, we look at point of sale, but the whole issue of the assessment, we've looked at it for lighting, but we've not looked at it for sidewalks. It may just be another option that gives us an ability to make it 43 years instead of 86.
Yeah, well, we like that option, and we're going to get it down so that you and I will be around and do it in the next 10 or 12 or 14 years here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for your leadership on this this issue, whether it be sidewalks or maintenance of the parkway and so forth. There's a lot of confusion by our constituency as to who's responsible, and those of us, when we walked precincts, talked to a lot of people who were very confused about that. And so the more information that we can get out there and the more that we can improve the quality of life. That ends the number of speakers. So thank you, Madam Clerk. Please open the roll on this item, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
That item's been approved. Mr. Clerk, the next item.
Item 25 was being held for Councilmember Parks.
Mr. Parks.
We can move that item because we were looking for the ordinance, but the ordinance will be forthcoming at a later date, so we can just move the item. You instruct the... No, it's already said.
Thank you. Madam Clerk. Excuse me, Mr. Wisar.
Madam President, and I just want to mention a little bit about the importance of this item for everyone to know about this. This actually came about because of a July 2006 Controller Chick. She released a performance audit that showed that the code enforcement inspectors spend more than 50% of their time filling out paperwork or doing administrative tasks. The audit also found that our major information systems relative to land development are not coordinated, resulting in duplicative data entry. And we know that we are already short on our inspectors, and the last thing we would want to see is them spending most of their time at doing administrative and desk time. Myself, along with Councilmember Ed Reyes, prepared a motion asking for the department to come up with a information technology strategic plan that could address the department's need to invest in mobile technology so that the inspectors are out in the field with mobile technology that will allow them to do more of their work in the field. They have come up with a great proposal that would generate $190,000 in revenue for the department. These dollars will be invested in mobile technology that will allow them to be out in the field more than the time they spent on the desk. The only question I have, is there someone here from the department that could answer a question on this? Is timeline, and hopefully when the ordinance comes back, we'll... Dave Lara. The face of Los Angeles, says Mr. Cardenas. Oh, there you are. The Controller's audit specifically calls for time-specific plans on addressing this. In terms of timing, we're going to get the ordinance back, but for implementation, what's the timing for this to take place? I think it's a crucial question because we know that sometimes we do some great things around here, but it takes a while to implement. So on this issue, what's the timing on the implementation?
Yeah, let me address that in two parts.
If you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, David Schnitker with the Department of Building and Safety. The first part is the CAO's recommendation, and part of this is that department will report back with a with a schedule, IT schedule for you within 30 days of the ordinance being passed. The second part of it is we have already begun a pilot project for the mobile devices for our new construction inspectors. And with the passing of this ordinance and providing a funding source for our code enforcement activities, we'll be able to extend that same concept to our code enforcement personnel as well. And we expect that could be started as early as this summer, given if the ordinance passes.
So this summer, just quickly we can get this to. And thank you. Oftentimes we hear a response that there's not enough money to do things. Here you got creative and found a way to extend the surcharge you were charging to make it more flexible, to allow you to use those monies more flexible in a more flexible manner. And you got very creative in making this possible. So thank you for your creativity and for your attention to this issue. And we look forward to the ordinance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Lamonge.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Mr. Weezer, that's exactly what we need to do with building and safety, to give them the technology to serve the people better. So we support you 1,000%. Thank you for your leadership in this effort. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Building and Safety. Push, push, push. Information is knowledge is power, and make sure you help the people that make Los Angeles safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamonge. This item is now before us. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
That item has been approved. Next item.
Item 28, called special for cards from the public.
Item 28, Zuma Dog. Then we'll be going out to the Van Nuys, to Miriam Fogler and Donna Perlman. Or Pearman, excuse me. Mr. Zuma Dog. Item number 28.
Oh, good. Hey, Jose, I like your glasses. You look good with that. Yeah, I was just about to leave. That was so long. I'm glad I just didn't leave. But this is about special event fee waivers. Let me explain to the people watching and also council members, I'd like you to be aware, this is something that the city has put up to allow little small nonprofit groups of the community to have some events like street fairs and gatherings where they can't afford the cost of street closures and, you know, the trash removal afterwards and stuff like that. So the city will kick in a couple thousand and not charge you for it. But what's happening is a lot of money is being funneled through nonprofits. A lot of the nonprofit groups get on the special event fee list, and those are a lot of... It's very distracting with all the talking. Oh, my goodness. But anyway, what happens is you got people with high salaries, with fancy cars. One of these things that came through here, it was a special event fee. I went over, it was a lot of money. It was a Venice Beach. You know, I vend on Venice. It was one of these Visit LA things they got a lot of money for. They had a guy with a booth on Venice. Is that what all the money went to? And they had a gigantic recreational vehicle. So... we got to watch these nonprofits be... I'm very distracted, y'all. I'm very distracted. I'll pull a Wendy Gruhl. So what we want to do, I would like to have, and speaking of Wendy Gruhl, when she is controller, I hope she runs an audit of all the nonprofits before they get on the money list to make sure we're not giving money to a big black hole of corporates. And you got ghost employees. Let's talk about ghost employees, man. I got this bat computer. You run someone's name through it. They're not even an employee, but they're taking a paycheck. What's that all about? Fancy vehicles, cars, people's husbands and wives that sit on the boards and these things.
You should talk to the item that's before us.
Okay, the item before us. Well, let me just say I support Chief Park's motion for an audit of all nonprofits before they get on the money list, y'all. And we'll just leave it at that on the realest though. Zuma Dog.
Thank you, Mr. Dog. Next is Miriam Fogler, followed by Donna Pearman out in our San Fernando Valley. Ms. Fogler.
Yes, trying to protect my eyes from this bright lights. I like what Zuma just said, and I want to commend Bernie Parks. He's a very good council person, but some of the stuff on the budget wasn't something. But this is the reason why we have these deficits, is because of these fee waivers. And they're not being held accountable. We need to be showing accountability here, and people need to be audited. Everywhere from the mayor to the city council, down here to special events here. This is not right. At least if you should get the money back from them. If you're going to charge the fees, they should be paying you back. So at least the city wouldn't be losing the money that we need here to be able to take care of our sidewalks and trees. On the last one I wanted to speak on was to stop the city from trying to get money from people trying to repair sidewalks and parkways, because I don't know, because this is a big thing, because you don't do the money, you don't have the money I'm getting an echo. Anyway, the city needs to maintain our sidewalks and parkways and enforce the laws and making sure that everybody's following the laws. And everybody should be complying to the laws, including the city council. Hello? Can you hear me now? Okay, so what I'm just saying is that anybody here sitting on the council want to have 3 terms in office, Prop under Prop R. You want to show that you're doing accountability here, showing all these fees that you're charging here. You know, this is adding up. I mean, this costed today $26,425, and not including I don't know what that is. That doesn't show how much it is, but every sentence here shows absorbed by the city. It's got to be stopped, because we need to give pay raises and benefits, better benefits to the city workers.
Thank you, Ms. Vogler. Ms. Pearman?
By the way, thank you, Madam President, for saying my name right. My name is Donna Pearman, a member of the Garcetti fan club. I want to look at these huge lists. I want you to look at these huge lists of fee waiving. This is free money that we don't have. Something has to give. City doesn't have enough money to take care of itself. Our schools will suffer, police will suffer, our city employees will suffer, probably to add taxes and needless fines you love so much. You can't take blood out of a stone. And with the CRA taking so much money, stealing so much, this looks like pennies here, but this adds up. You can't just rubber stamp it. Close the roll, tabulate the vote, 15 ayes. This is a lot of money that we don't have. So you can't just look through it and waving this and waving that, and just like Zuma Dog said, oh, by the way, hi, Zuma Dog, you can't just let all these nonprofit organizations get free advance. Usually these big events that please look at this clearly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That item is now before us. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
Those items have been approved. Next item.
Item 30 was called special by Councilmember Labange, and there are cards on that.
Yes, there is a card. Would you like to hear from the speaker first, Mr. Labange, on item number 30? Ms. Vogler from the San Fernando Valley. Okay. Ms. Vogler?
Yes. Oh, yeah. He's here. I'm here. I have grown up in here in the city, and I love Griffith Park. And I was very saddened to see what happened last week with the fires. And I would like to be able to restore it to the way it was before the fires. We need to have people go up there and plant trees to do different things to help make it, like a park should look like. I don't want to see no bricks and sidewalks that look like a city. I want to keep it very like a park, very to nature, because we're so round with all the concrete around us. We don't have enough green in the city. So I would like to see Griffith Park to be maintained and restored to its grandeur the way it was. Thank you, and thank you for the firemen and the police for helping to take care of it. Bless you all.
Thank you. In this item, to move forward, Madam Clerk. Yes, we're fine. Mr. Labange wants to move forward. So, Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
There was no card, Mr. Zumadog, on this item. Mr. Alarcon, I know, wanted to ask for us to reconsider an item and call it special.
I just asked a question. There's another item on Griffith Park right there.
31.
It's a special, I guess. It's a special. Is this a special?
Sure,
meeting?
we'll take item number 31. Now, it also required public hearing. So before we do item 10, Mr. Alarcon, we're going to consider item number 31. We have 3 public comment cards. Zumadog, and I apologize, Mr. Zumadog, item 30 was put in item number 31. So if you'd like to address both, you can go ahead. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, item 30, we'll combine that real quick. The Griffith Park, there's a lot on here for good reason. Item 30 is for a brochure for Griffith Park, to produce a brochure, $500,000. No, how much is it? $7,500. The question I would like to know is, should we postpone the brochure until, isn't there a master plan in the works and whatnot? maybe I'll contact you about that. Maybe it should be put on hold until we're certain, because then you'd have to make a new brochure. Okay, now, public amenities improvement for the public transit, patrons, residents, and businesses. There was the fire at Griffith Park. I know one thing that the fire department's concerned about are the service roads. Not so much the road that leads into the Griffith Park itself, but that's not going to be good for emergency services. It's too narrow. The fire department, they like to request emergency services of the fire roads for all the brush to be cleared. That's going to be something that's important. And also, there is concern, yikes, dicey topic. I hate to bring this up. I'm just going to say at one time, there is concern that some Griffith Park expansion amenities will be factored in under these emergency services to try to bamboozle a curveball past everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fogler, out in our Van Nuys office.
Yeah, I want to say that, like I said, I want to keep the park the way it is. I mean, it's a beautiful place, and I want to keep it, to cherish it for generations to come. I have a lovely daughter that's 13 and a half, and I want her to be able to have it for her and her children and my generation. So I don't want to have, building going up there. Just to make it very nice, very beautiful park, keep it the way it is, and we can bring in nice, beautiful trees, and we can make it real green, nice grass, and have picnic tables like we always did up there and everything. And the trails for the horses also need to be restored. Thank you.
Thank you. This item is now before us. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
Since we have our last item that is related to Griffith Park, and then we'll go to the reconsideration, could we, we haven't gone to the special agenda yet?
Not yet, Madam President.
Okay, can we call this? Okay, looks like we're having some discussion before we go into the special meeting. If it's okay with you, Mr. Labange, Mr. Alarcon wanted to ask us to reconsider item number 10. Madam Clerk, we could open the roll on the reconsideration on item number 10, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
That item is now before us. Mr. Alarcon?
Yes, members, if we could have DWP staff step forward. I just wanted to gain the assurance that the cause of this capital outlay, which I fully support, by the way, I think we have to reinvest in our infrastructure at DWP, at both the power and the water side. But I also want to make sure that the ratepayers know what's coming. So I understand the intent is to borrow $600 million as part of a total $2.1 billion package. Is that not correct? It's part of the $2.1 billion.
My name is Ron Vasquez. I'm Chief Financial Officer of the department. I didn't hear your question, Councilman.
Oh, I was saying that the current action is seeking to borrow $600 million.
Yes.
And that's part of a $2.1 billion package, correct?
Yes, it is.
And the rate increase, which was intended to fund these efforts, was 2.75, was passed in 2006 for 2 years only, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so is the total amount of that rate increase going to cover the $2.1 billion?
That was incorporated in our estimate last year that was approved by the board and your council. Yes.
So you are saying that the 2.75 will cover the cost of the $2.1 billion, and that there won't be a need to come back for more after the 2 years? Because this is a 10-year capital outlay program?
Right. The 2.75% for 2 years that was approved last year was to cover the last fiscal year and the upcoming fiscal year. And it was based on our financial forecast at the time our budget was passed last year. We are currently in the midst of budget negotiations or review with our board We have not presented them with an updated financial plan as of yet, and plan to do that sometime next week.
So does that mean you're going to be asking for more?
Incorporated in the forecast for last year were the 2.75% rate increases for the current fiscal year and next fiscal year, as well as 3.7% rate increases for fiscal years 2008, 2009, 2009, 2010, and 2010-11. So that was our financial forecast last year was the 2.75 for 2 years and 3.7% for 3 years.
Okay, so the 2.75%, which ends November 2008, will the ratepayers see a decrease?
From the 2.75%?
Yes.
No, they will not see a decrease from what the rate increase was approved by the council.
Okay. The 2.75 increase ends in November of 2008. So why wouldn't they see a decrease?
The 2.75% rate increases that were approved by the council last year are not for limited periods of time.
Oh, so it's an ongoing?
Yes.
Okay. So, based on all of the rate increases that have been approved by the Mayor and Council, you project that the $2.1 billion project will be fully funded?
Based on our projections last year, it would be fully funded with the 2.75%.
What are your projections right now?
For 2 years, and the 3.7% increases for 3 years. We have not completed our financial projections to support our budget, which is not, and we have not reviewed it with our board and plan to do so next week.
Okay, I guess the bottom line is that the ratepayers continue to bear the burden of these costs, and yet they're not getting the benefit of long-term picture here, and it concerns me that we are continuing to borrow, and yet there's no end in sight in terms of the rates, and so it seems inappropriate for us to be moving forward with this kind of borrowing. I just got here, a month ago. I'm not going to get in the way of moving this forward, but it seems to me that we've got to have a better view of what to anticipate for the ratepayers. So you're telling me that you cannot say that there won't be a request for an increase in the next 2 years?
That is right. And I might say again that our 5-year plan that was presented last year did call for continuing rate increases for 2008-9 through 2010-11 of 3.75% per year.
Each year? Okay.
Yes.
And that's already been approved?
That was just for informational purposes presented to our board. The only thing that has been officially approved was the 2.75% for the current year and 2.75%
okay, so then
for next
the council
year.
can anticipate each year having to approve somewhere in the nature of 3.75 a year in rate increases.
We're in the midst of making our financial...
It may vary from
yes,
that, but that's your projection as
yes.
an average till 2011.
Yes. That's based on our last financial forecast. Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Alcon, you are over time. If you'd like to press
just
your
let me
button
say
again.
that the infrastructure at DWP is falling apart. These are things we're pressured to do, but I absolutely believe that we have to do a better job of informing the ratepayers about what is coming.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alcon, for those questions. Yes, and it is an investment that Los Angeles has to make, because without water, we don't have a city. Without power, we don't have a city. So keep informing the public, keep them updated, get involved with the neighborhood council, which your general manager has MOUs signed to do discussions as it relates to these rates for both power and water, and inform the people. We have to invest in this. You invested $35 million in a water system in 1990s in Griffith Park, which saved a neighborhood. It destroyed wild land, open space of the park, but it saved the neighborhood. So that investment is key. And thank you, Mr. Alacon, for bringing it up. But we have to move forward because this is an investment that is made before and will continue to be made. I thank the Department of Water and Power. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. This item is now before us again. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
That item has been approved. Next item.
Item 35 was called special for cards from the public.
We have 2 cards on this item. Nikki Tesfari. Nikki? Is Nikki here? Don't see her. Miriam Fogler out in our Van Nuys office. Is Miriam still there? Miriam? We're item number 35. She's not there? She's not there. Okay. Since none of the speakers are here on this item, Madam Clerk, open the roll on this item, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
Thank you. Next item.
Madam President, that does take care of the items on the regular meeting. Do you wish to recess the regular and go into the special meeting?
Yes. We will recess and go to the special agenda.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Gruel, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Westenzine, Garcetti, 13 members present and a quorum. Madam President.
Thank you. First item.
It's a one-item agenda. It's item 37, item for which public hearing has not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration, and this is the mayor's declaration of a local emergency regarding the Griffith Park wildfire.
Yes, we did have a public speaker card. I do not see Mr. Zumadog here, so we will open and close public comment. Mr. Labange.
Members, I'd like to ask staff that has been here all morning, just give a quick brief. Chief Bursick from the Fire Service, as well as representatives from the Parks Department, CAO. As you know, what is described as an 800-acre fire plus is really probably about a 1,400-acre fire that destroyed much of the area of the eastern portion of the park. I spent an hour in it this morning looking at the work that is being done. The mayor has shown great leadership in declaring this an emergency in the event of the challenges that we recently had and the challenges that present us in the future. If we have a brief report, please.
Sure. Chief Bursick, the Chief of Staff of the Fire Department. As everyone knows, on May 8th, Tuesday, May 8th, we had a fire at Griffith Park. And as Councilmember Tom Labange said, it was probably approximately 1,400 acres. As the crow flies, it was about 800 acres. We had over 200 firefighters there and numerous agencies. And on May 11th is when we actually had it contained. We knew it was going to be a large-scale emergency, and we applied on May 8th for what's called the FMAG grant, which is through California CAL FIRE, and you have to apply for that grant while the fire is uncontrolled and burning. We applied for it on May 8th, and it was accepted into the application process, and now we're waiting to hear back for the rest of the process. We have 90 days to, actually 90 days we should have the costs actually documented at that time, and we have 6 months to come up with those costs, and then we'll be reporting back to OES or CAL FIRE.
Chief, anything else for the department?
At this time, no.
And from Recreation and Parks? Assistant General Manager.
Regina Adams, Recreation and Parks. We are currently doing our daily, hourly, an assessment of the park and the situation, and especially of the upcoming holiday weekend, to assess any additional areas that may be possible to be reopened to the public. So we are still doing that assessment, and of course working with the CAO and the fire department as far as anything that they need from us as far as for the declaration.
Right, I picked this up here, Mr. Rosendahl. This is a bottle that burned up there in Dante's View. Probably could sell it on Venice Beach for as a vendor, you know, exactly. But what we have here is a tremendous challenge ahead, and we're going to do the right thing. Recreation and Parks, under the direction of the mayor, has organized a task force to work to make the proper steps. And I would tell you, my guess, that it will take 20 years before the park returns to what it was. It was a very hard burn, and the challenge that are there. What I do want Recreation Parks to do is, where it's safe, open it back up to the public, because the public wants their park back. Where it's safe, open it up to the equestrians. The horses want to ride again. They've been tied up. They want to ride again. Where it's safe. And also, if you could check with the Tournament of Roses to see if we could rent railing near, so we could open up the merry-go-round. The merry-go-round, again, was saved by Engine 38 from Wilmington as they stood between there, along with 15s from South Los Angeles. And I would like to get it open when it's safe to bring people back into the park. We have banned, but it's not, Mr. City Attorney, would you know, on the emergency order to ban barbecuing, we have an ordinance drafted. I don't know if you've brought that back to us yet. We're counting on you, Mr. City Attorney.
I won't disappoint you, Mr. Labange.
Okay, because we need that. Maybe even have it, if there's an emergency one, because Memorial Day weekend is like the kickoff of summer fun, and it's not just Griffith Park, but other large parks that are in hillside areas, such as O'Melveny Park, Hanson Dam, Elysian, would need this kind of protection as well. Thank you all very much, staff from the city departments. Work closely with you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Madam Clerk, open the roll on this item, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
12 ayes.
That item's been approved. Next item. And we'll go forthwith.
Madam President, do you wish to adjourn the special meeting?
We will adjourn the special meeting and go back to our regular meeting.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
They will be posted and referred.
Excuses on the desk. Councilmember Hahn requests to be excused to arrive at 10:45 on May 23rd for city business. A motion is required.
Mr. Parks moved. Mr. Alarcon seconds.
Councilmember Gruhl requests to be excused Friday, June 29th for city business. A motion is required.
Mr. Reyes moves and Mr. Zine seconds.
Councilmember Reyes requests to be excused Wednesday, June 6th for city business. That meets council policy.
All right, Mr. Rosendahl agrees to move, and Mr. Smith seconds.
Councilmember Rosendahl requests to be excused for the meetings of July 13th, 17th, 18th, and 20th for city business. Meets council policy.
We're having so much fun together. Mr. Zine moves, and Mr. Reyes seconds that.
Councilmember Perry requests to be excused to arrive at 11 o'clock for the meetings of June 8th, 12th, and 20th, and for the entire meeting of Tuesday, June 26th. All for city business. Meets council policy.
Okay. Ms. Hahn moves and Mr. Labange seconds.
And finally, Mr. Garcetti requests to be excused to leave at 11:30 on Wednesday, May 30th, and to leave at 11:15 on Tuesday, June 15th. All for city business, and it does meet council policy.
Oh, so he does not need our approval. Okay.
And that does clear the desk.
That clears the desk. Do we have announcements today, colleagues? Any announcements? Mr. Parks.
President, we have an announcement of the Council District 8 Youth Council will have their annual energy fair on Saturday, May 26, 9:30 to 3 p.m. at the Jesse Brewer Park at the corner of Vermont and Exposition.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Do we have adjourning motions? Yes, we do. If we could please ask everyone to rise.
Actually, I think Councilmember Parks is going to adjourn in memory of Yolanda King, but I'd like to say a few things afterwards. So.
Yes, Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Madam President. I have, unfortunately, three adjourning motions. First one, I would like to ask that we adjourn in memory of Yolanda Denise King, who passed away on Tuesday, May 15th. Ms. King is the oldest child of civil rights leader Martin Luther King. She was only 51 years of age. Currently, her cause of death is unknown. She was born November 17, 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. She had a very diverse career. She was an actress, a producer, an author, a motivational speaker, where she dedicated most of her life to her father's dream of peace and nonviolence. She was the founder of the Higher Ground production in Culver City. She appeared in several films, including The Ghost of Mississippi, and played Rosa Parks in the 1978 miniseries called King. She's survived by her sister, the Reverend Bernice King, and her brothers Martin Luther King III and Dexter Scott King, and her arrangements are pending. And I'd like to have Mrs. Perry and Mrs. Hahn would like to join on that.
Members, Ms. Hahn would like to say a few words.
Right. It's just when you think about Yolanda King, I mean, she was born just 2 weeks before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. She was just 10 weeks old when the King family home was bombed in 1956 as her father was attending a boycott rally. And she was 7 when her father, of course, mentioned her and her siblings in his great speech, I Have a Dream, because he said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So you can imagine what it was like for her and her siblings to grow up sort of with that legacy of being mentioned every time that speech was repeated. I really was fortunate to meet her a couple times, but I will tell you, I really appreciated her recently in the last few years when the Martin Luther King Jr. Hospital, who was named after her father, was in so much trouble and threatened to be closed, threatened to have it be downsized, which ultimately it ended up being. But she was great because she would come to the meetings that we had every time they were convened to rally the community against the closure of that hospital or against the downsizing of that hospital. And I was very fortunate to hear her speak to keep that hospital alive, which bore her father's name. And it was great because she, I grew up obviously as the daughter of Kenny Hahn, who always would tell the story of when Dr. King came to Los Angeles, and my dad was the only public official to welcome him at the airport. And then, of course, when that hospital was built, he called Mrs. King and asked her if it would be all right if they named it after her husband. And I grew up hearing those stories, but I always wondered if his children grew up hearing the same stories that we did. And she was great when she was here for the rally for the hospital. She reminded me that she also had heard the story of how good my father had been to treat her father when he came to Los Angeles. So we sort of shared this common bond. But she was a great woman. She died way too young. But I really appreciated the fact that she came to stand on behalf of the people in saving that hospital when it was being threatened. We will miss her.
Ms. Perry?
Obviously, while their father was taken from them at far too young of an age, he had quite an impact, as did their mother. And her brother was here not too long ago, unannounced, because of his keen interest in helping people who are homeless, and quietly, humbly, and without a great deal of fanfare, spent a lot of time over in Skid Row, and in particular over at the Midnight Mission, just trying to learn as much as he can to see what they could do through their organization to help people on a national basis. But obviously they were raised in the tradition of their parents, and the lessons took. But hopefully they will be able to get through this great loss and carry on the work of their family.
Thank you. Mr. Parks. And we'll do that all members. Mr. Parks.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to ask that we adjourn in memory of Ernest McBride. Ernest McBride was a legend in the South Los Angeles and Long Beach area as a civil rights leader. He passed away on May 5th, 2007 due to complications while in the hospital. He was 97 years old. He was an organizer, a union activist, a local NAACP field secretary. Born in 1909 in Mississippi, he was one of 9 children. Completed his studies at Arkansas and later moved to Southern California. In 1940, he co-founded and became the first field secretary of the Long Beach NAACP. He was an activist along with his wife, Lillian McBride, and they attacked discrimination in various segments. They also were successful in integrating the Long Beach Police Department, the Naval Shipyard, the Coal Market Chain, and also the General Telephone Company. He received a Long Beach Commendation in 1965 for risking his life and saving three children in an apartment fire. He also, another part of his career, actually played as a catcher for the, at that time called the Colored Giants in the Negro Baseball League, where he competed against Jackie Robinson. He passed away on May the 5th. And
Ms. Hahn, seconds. And Ms. Perry.
okay, and then the final request that the council adjourn in memory of Annie Evelyn Cullamy, who passed away on May 14th. She's a native of Beaumont, Mississippi. She received her elementary and high school education in public schools. After relocating in Los Angeles, she continued her studies at both USC and UCLA, earning her Bachelor of Science in 1950 and her Master's in Education in 53. She was involved in activities as the national chairperson of the National Sorority of the Phi Delta Kappa Negro History Committee. She coordinated the first workshop on techniques of teaching Negro history in Los Angeles Unified School District. She also planned and displayed the Black History exhibit for conferences sponsored by the California State Education and Teachers Association. She's an active member of the Ward AME Church in the 8th District. Memorial services will be held May 24th at Ward at 1177 West 25th Street. And so we will miss her. She's another activist in the community.
Thank you. Any other adjourning motions? If not, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.